Hey, everybody. Welcome. So glad to be with you all tonight. It's going to be a great conversation. So be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are going to have a great chat tonight. Just an excellent conversation. Should be good stuff. Always a great conversation here. We're going to talk about a few things. So, get ready for it because here it comes.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
All right. Welcome, everybody. And thank you, Gleb. Welcome, everybody. Everything seems to be going pretty well. I am here in Chicago. I'm going to be here for a few more days. Then I'll be back in New York, and then I'll be on my way back for our great big conference that is happening August 6th. August 6th here in the Chicago area, we are going to have an amazing kick-ass conference. I am really, really excited about it. I have seen the hotel. It's great. I'm booking the security firm. We're going to have some fancy security there to make sure that we are all safe. And the team here on the ground is amazing. It's just been awesome. And there's a lot of things happening in our little universe. So I guess I'll quickly, for anyone who might be new, since we have a lot of subscribers this month. I mean, wow. It's only been July for like 6 or 7 days. What is it? Today is, the 6th of July. For only 6 days, it's been July. We already have over 200 people have subscribed for this month. So it's amazing. Our audience is growing very rapidly, even though it's rigged against us, completely rigged against us. The algorithms are rigged against us. They are trying to silence us. They've shut down my PayPal. They banned us, Russian state-affiliated media. They're doing everything they can to just silence us, but we are still going and going and going. And we're going to have an amazing conference August 6th here in Chicago. So, just real quick, for those of you who may not be familiar. So the way that we do these lives, I give my opening remarks, while they're going on, I've got my pen and I'm writing down your super chat questions. So I'll just jot them down on this lovely, lovely piece of paper. I will write them down. And then after I finish my opening remarks, we will do a roll call where I'll call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We'll find out who's on the other side of the camera, who's watching, because we are an amazing community here. We really are. The amount of people, I'm going to move the mic right over to me. That'll be good. Can you hear me better now? There we go. You can probably hear me much better now. We are going to be doing the roll call to find out who's on the other side of the camera. We'll be finding out about our community. That'll be good. And then on top of that, I will then answer your super chat questions in the second half of the show. That's how it's going to work. I answer the super chat questions in the second half of the show. It's great. It's awesome. So if you have something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, just shoot me a super chat and I will write it down. I will answer to the best of my ability. I may not be able to give you the answer that you want, but it will be an answer to some degree or other. So a lot of housekeeping, and then we'll get to the essence of what I wanted to talk about in my opening stream tonight. First of all, check out Main Trend News. Main Trend News is the news outlet associated with the Center for Political Innovation. We have analytical articles on there. We have news updates about the Center for Political Innovation and about world events. So it's not just the news plug on cpiusa.org. It's now Main Trend News. So go and check out Main Trend News. It's awesome. It is totally, totally awesome. Check out Main Trend News. So that's one housekeeping item that we want to talk about. The other thing is we need your help. we have an event coming up August 6th. We have rented the venue. It's going to be awesome. We're booking the security. It's going to be awesome. We're bringing in some speakers from around the country. That's going to be awesome. Dan Kovalik is going to be there. Just spoke with the great Dan Kovalik, author of The Plot to Attack Iran, The Plot to Scapegoat Russia. Dan Kovalik is going to be there. It's awesome. We're working on some other folks and getting everything in order. But if you want to help the event happen, just send us some money on Cash App. That would be the best way. Just give us a direct donation on Cash App. $CPI events. There we go. That is the best way to send us a contribution. So CPI events on Cash App. Just shoot us a contribution if you want to help us out. So many people already have. And if you want to help this great, important event coming up. Also important to mention, California, July 16th, Say No to NATO rally in Sacramento in Cesar Chavez Plaza. And that's the California Center for Political Innovation. They're standing up against NATO, challenging the lies of the Atlanticist pathology and the imperialists. That's great stuff. So be sure to check that out. And we're having this event in Chicago, and we have a team that is on the ground here in Chicago building the event. Some people from out of town are here. Lily's from out of town. She's here. Elizabeth's from out of town. She's here. We also got a great team of local folks. And yesterday, we did some outreach here in Chicago at the Harold Washington Cultural Center, which is a cultural center in the African-American community. We were out there, and I just want to show you just a really quick video of some of the outreach that went on at the Harold Washington Cultural Center near there. This guy in the city, CJ, he makes great banners. He made this beautiful banner. I just want to show people what he's doing. Look at that. Russia and China are not our enemies. Wow. Wow. He was out there many hours, several hours in the afternoon. They were out there. Russia and China are not our enemies. Great stuff. So what's your message out here today?
Russia and China are not our enemy. Wall Street and the Pentagon imperialists are.
Very good.
I think that Chicago is ripe for our anti-imperialist message.
These days in the media, as living standards just take a nosedive, there's so much negative coverage about Russia and China to distract us from our real enemies, Wall Street and NATO. So we want to let everybody know that Russia and China are our friends, not our enemies.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome, you know, and they were out there. They were distributing the Green Book by Gaddafi. They were distributing Jesus is a Socialist, a book compilation of quotations from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., quotations from the Bible, Edward Bellamy, Eugene Debs about socialism. And people were very interested in hearing about it. It was really a great day of outreach yesterday. And actually, we're going to be doing outreach later in the week. Jimmy Dore is coming to town, and I will be at one of Jimmy Dore's shows, and we're going to be out at the Jimmy Dore shows, leafleting and such. So it's going to be awesome. I'm really excited. There's a great crew of people here. I don't want to just start naming people and then forget to name some of them, but you've seen some of them in the videos, and you'll meet them if you're here in Chicago. Just awesome folks. It's really, really, really great, and we're doing great work. So I just wanted to shout out all of that. And like I said, if you want to give a contribution to help the important anti-imperialist rally happening August 6th, just shoot us a contribution on Cash App. That way it just goes right through. We don't have to worry about a middleman. You know, that's the best way to send us a contribution. But things are going really, really well here in Chicago. And I just wanted to get that out of the way and let folks know about that and how awesome things are going right now. We're all worried about the ongoing fighting. We're all worried about the gas prices. We're all worried about the low-wage police state that is unfolding. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. And, you know, this next part is part of the stream I really don't want to do. I don't want to do it. And I think there's also people on here who don't want me to do this. But I think there's also a lot of people who do want me to do this, right? Because I notice this. Every time I make a clip like this, people like it. So we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to do it. We're going to have to toughen up and do it. We're just going to have to buckle down and do it. We are going to have to do this. And, you know, look, I could make a video every time one of these idiots talks about me. I could do that, right? And if I did that, I would do nothing else. I would never make any other videos. They would all just be response videos or me debunking this lie or that lie. And you don't know how many emails or Twitter messages or direct messages or Facebook I get of, oh my God, did you hear what this person just said? Did you hear what this person just said? And I really don't generally like doing response videos or whatever because, we want to change the world. We want to overthrow capitalism and establish a society where the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a few. We want to defeat U.S. imperialism. We want to establish a government of action that fights for working families. We don't want to just sit on the internet talking about internet drama all day long. No one really benefits from that. But I think for some people, this is kind of like a soap opera. It's like, oh my God, did you see who's dating so-and-so this week? No, he didn't. No, he didn't. I swear, there's people that are like that. So if you're one of those people, this next little bit is for you. And on top of that, there's a particular reason that, this person that we're about to debunk has talked smack about me a lot, right? He's one of my greatest enemies, one of my greatest detractors, the amazing Jabba the Vosh. Wah, 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 wah. Socialism is just worker cooperatives. Wah, 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 wah. Wah, 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 wah. Class struggle is anti-Semitic. Wah, 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 wah. Bourgeoisie is code for Jew. Wah, 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 wah. All real socialists are Nazis. Wah, 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 wah. The great Jabba the Vosh, one of the greatest examples of why we have to get out of the movement into the masses. Why the socialist movement has to completely change the direction it's moving in. Because if people like him continue to dominate it, we're going to end up in the gutter and in some kind of weird synthetic left postmodern fascism. But the great Jabba the Vosh, he talks smack about me all the time. And on his streams, he's obsessed with me, right? I wrote the BreadTube book that had like a couple paragraphs about him. And he waved it around on his streams and he's shouting, Caleb wrote a whole book about me, everybody. Buy this book. It's all about me. It's all about me. And it's like, it's not all about you, dude. It's about, there's like 6 paragraphs about you, my friend. But, he's obsessed, right? And I love this. On his stream, he's like, my dad read the book and he told me, and it's like, Vosh, how old are you? You're like almost 30 and you can't read a book for yourself. You have to have your dad tell you what the book's about. Like, did your dad have to make sure there weren't any naked pictures in it or something? Make sure it was age appropriate for you there, Vosh, right? I think if someone wrote a book and it was all about me, I'd probably read it for myself. So I don't know why he said that, but he's got this like odd obsession with me, but he like makes his dad read the book about me because he's got this childish, like he's afraid he might be triggered by it. He's got to have daddy like read the book and tell him what it says. But anyway, because, Jabba the Vosh, he talks about me all the time, right? He talks about me all the time. But every so often he talks about me in a way that it's actually worth responding to. Most of the time, it ain't. Most of the time, he's just talking out of his ass, right? He said that there are only men in the Center for Political Innovation. That's pretty obviously false and pretty ridiculous. He claimed there were like only 11 people at our conference when there were well over 100 people at our conference. He makes stuff up. And the idea, and I swear, every time Vosh talks about me, which is pretty frequently this guy talks about me. Every time I get like 6 like Twitter people, these random Twitter accounts with like 3 followers message me and they're like, did you hear what Vosh says about me? I swear this is Vosh's public relations team, right? The idea is to get him more publicity, to get his name in the algorithms more. He's got like a troll farm of like, people that are getting paid minimum wage that then like try to get reaction videos from everybody. So that's why I don't want to react to him that much, because it's like playing into what he wants. Clearly the PR firm his Hollywood daddy hired to make him go viral, they clearly want us to be talking about Vosh. Well, this is one of those times where we're going to do what Vosh wants us to do. And we're going to talk about Vosh as much as it sickens us, And I mean, he'll have to have his dad watch it. So his dad is probably watching right now. We love you, Mr. Kaczynski. I'm sorry you had to have an embarrassing fail son that the whole world is laughing at. Mr. Kaczynski's watching and taking notes to tell little Jabba. But we are going to have to debunk one of these videos. And the reason we're going to debunk this is because every so often, Vosh goes so far off the deep end and says things that are so wildly inaccurate, you need to highlight them. Because look, we all know it's a widely understood thing that they say the best lies contain a grain of truth. You ever heard that? The best lies contain a grain of truth, right? That if you're reading something written by a liar, but there are 3 or 4 facts in it that are clearly verifiable, and they're facts you doubted too. They're facts that don't seem obvious, but they're verifiable. You're more likely to believe the stuff they're lying about, right? This is a very common trick, right? You know, if someone says a bunch of things and you go, wait, is that true? And then they prove 3 or 4 of them that didn't seem very possible, you're going to think, wow, this person knows what they're talking about. So the best lies contain a grain of truth. But, you know, as the notorious Adolf Hitler wrote about in Mein Kampf, the best way to lie is to lie big, to just lie big, to say things that are just so untrue that people find it hard to believe that you could possibly lie that much, right? Because everyone tells a little lie in their life. You know, they're late to work and they say, oh, my alarm didn't go off, and actually they were being lazy, or, you know, or I mean, people lie, right? People lie, right? They cover up, you know, whatever. They pick their nose in the bathroom, or they didn't brush their teeth that morning, or, people lie, right? People lie. All right. Okay. Wrote it down. You know, people lie, but they don't lie big. They don't tell big lies. And so big lies are much more effective than little lies. And Vaush, you know, he does a little bit of both. He lies big and he lies little. And when he lies little, you know, there might be something like a valid. It might just be, you know, sometimes when he brings things up, they are just legitimate differences of opinion, which I'm fine with. Look, you can disagree with me. You know, a lot of communists disagree with me about the class nature of China. I think China is a socialist society, and I'm happy to explain why. But there's a lot of people I know that just don't agree with me on that. Well, we disagree. I think China is definitely a socialist society. You don't. But, you know, if you're against wars and you're not, you know, pushing propaganda to try and get us to invade China, if you agree with me about whether China's socialist or not, I really don't care, right? That's not where the struggle's at. Is about the ideological question. You know. Wrote it down. You know, that's not really where it's at, right? And that, you know, I mean, that, you know, there are little minute disagreements people have about points of Marxism, etc. And I don't really care about that. So when Vaush is like raising, well, he thinks this or that, fine, right? But every so often, he just goes off the rails and he lies so obviously. He says things that are so obviously false that you need to show it to the world, because it can help inoculate people against Vaush. And that's why I'm showing this. I want anyone who's considering looking at Vaush or believing Vaush about anything, or turning to him for ideological leadership about anything, I want them to listen to what he says in this clip, because he's so obviously lying. So obviously lying. I mean, he's just not telling the truth in any conceivable way. And I want people to see that, because that's how you can tell that he's a complete big fat liar. I mean, this is the art of the big lie. He's saying things that are so obviously false, but he's just bluffing. He assumes, why would he lie about something like that? I mean, no one could lie that badly. Well, you're going to see him lie on here, because this is our community, right? There's like 200 people watching right now. It's been going up to like 300 lately. You know, we have a good crew of people. There's probably a couple thousand people that'll watch this in the coming weeks. That's great. You know, but our community, we know what we talk about on these streams. And we know what we're about. We know what we stand for. But we're going to watch Vaush explain to his audience what it is we stand for. And I think you're going to see that anyone who is at all familiar with what we do on this YouTube channel is going to know that he is really a dishonest actor. Like, this guy has no interest in telling the truth whatsoever. He is a highly dishonest person, and that he's got a job to do, which is smear and destroy the reputations of anyone who's anti-imperialist, anyone who doesn't celebrate the CNN propaganda and hostility to Russia. And that is all he is. He is a complete smear artist and shill, and he's not even really a socialist. And so I'm just going to show you what Vosh tells his community that we're all about, because I mean, I want you to see this, right? Because, anyone who tells you, there might be other things Vosh says that sound credible, but he said this, and he knows he's lying about this. He knows he's lying. So let's just start out. This is a video that Vosh made. The title of it is Caleb Maupin is a fascist, and he's got fascist in all capital letters. This is Vosh. This is how he starts out the video, and it just goes downhill from there. And it's very revealing. And there's parts of it. Well, we'll get to it. Let's just have fun with it. So this is, hold your stomach, cover your eyes and ears. This is Vosh being Vosh. This is who Vosh is, folks. Watch this, and you will know who Vosh is, and you'll know why no one should listen to this lying sack of garbage. Here we go.
By the way, that when he talks about who the enemy is in the West, he never actually says capitalism, does he? He always says institutions that coincidentally have conspiracy theories around them about Jewish control.
No,
like,
never.
he'll always say the bankers, or Wall Street, or the elite, or the Pentagon, or Washington. But he never says, like, no, again, there's nothing inherently wrong with saying any of those things on their own. The issue is that I've heard him talk for quite a while, and I almost never hear him say capitalism. He doesn't talk about capitalism. He doesn't say...
You hear that, folks? I never talk about capitalism. Never do I talk about capitalism. Never have I ever criticized capitalism. All I do is I criticize bankers, and I criticize the White House and the Pentagon and big corporations. I never criticize capitalism. Never. That's what he claims. Now, I mean, if you're part of this community, I think you know that's a bunch of malarkey. I think you'll know I have an 8-video series called the Saxton Lectures that begins with me explaining the problems of capitalism and quoting Marx extensively. I think you'll know that I talk extensively on almost every stream. I talk about the problem of overproduction, the tendency of the falling rate of profit. We talk about surplus value, and we talk about capitalism as, imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage. I was on Crosstalk on RT yesterday, and I said this is capitalism in its monopoly stage, as Lenin referred to it. We talk about capitalism all the time. One of the first books I published as a part of CPI, Getting Rich Without Capitalism. It was all about capitalism. And we talk, not only do we talk about capitalism nonstop on these streams, but we talk about capitalism and we define it as what it actually is. Capitalism is production organized for profit. It is a system where the means of production, the centers of economic power, function to make profits for private owners, where you have a profit-centered economy that is not rationally planned. And Vosh does not oppose capitalism because he just believes in worker cooperatives, which would still be profit-oriented, right? And that is one of my biggest critiques of the breadtube community, is that they don't really oppose capitalism. Opposing capitalism and favoring a cooperative model is still having profits in command. If the Pentagon, if all the military corporations were cooperatives, how would that stop the military-industrial complex? That would just expand the desire to make profits from war from the corporate boardroom all the way down to the factory floor. I mean, if the prisons for profit were all just cooperatives and the guards were like shareholders, how would that stop private prisons from wanting to make money and locking people up? That just addressing the inequity in ownership between the worker and the factory owner does not eliminate capitalism, because capitalism is production organized for profit, and profits and human needs do not align. There are many, many examples of things like war and the prison industrial complex and eliminating jobs with technology and poverty amid plenty. All the problems of a society where the means of production are organized to make profits not being addressed because you just have a worker cooperative. So Vosh isn't really a socialist. He's not really a socialist. He doesn't oppose production for profit. And every night on these streams, we rant and rave against what Karl Marx said that capitalism is: production organized for profit. Frederick Engels, he said, under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital, meaning that capitalism is a system where nothing gets done unless a private capitalist makes money from it. And that is what we are struggling against. Mao Zedong, he called it profits in command. That's what capitalism is. I actually oppose it And he doesn't. He wants to, he wants employees to get, instead of the wage, he just wants them to get a stock bonus or a stock dividend. He wants the employees to be co-owners, but he doesn't actually oppose capitalism. And it's interesting because he's complaining. He alleges that I never criticize capitalism as an economic system, which I do. And then he's saying, and he's claiming that I criticize the White House, I do criticize the Pentagon, I do criticize, the big corporations, et cetera. Well, the thing is, Vaush is projecting, because that's the mirror image of what he does. He just vaguely criticizes capitalism and tells you have to believe Big Pharma about the vaccines, and tells you have to believe the U.S. media that's telling you that we should go to war with Russia and we should escalate confrontations with Russia. He vaguely criticizes capitalism, and then he tells you should believe everything the mainstream media says about China. He vaguely criticizes capitalism while he says that the FBI are good and that the reason we need to dump Trump is he's disrespecting our great FBI. While he tells you to turn your family members into the FBI if they're involved in QAnon, he just criticizes this vague concept of capitalism, which is what, businesses not being worker co-ops or something in his mind. And he never actually fights any of the capitalist institutions. Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party, used to say socialism is as socialism does. And if your talk of capitalism is just, I'm against unfairness between employers and workers, but on all the issues, you side with the capitalist institutions like the Pentagon, like Big Pharma, like the prison industrial complex, like the mainstream media. If you side with the big corporations and capitalists all the time, but you never actually, but at the same time, you just vaguely criticize capitalism, that's useless. That doesn't do any good, the British Labour Party are socialists. Whoop-de-doo. They're the main imperialist party in Britain. Right, and that he's got it all wrong, right? What if I didn't criticize capitalism on these streams? What if I didn't? What if I never mentioned capitalism, but I was on here ranting against the Pentagon, ranting against Big Pharma, ranting about crimes against working people? Would that be better or worse than some guy who sits on there and says, "Yeah, Russia's evil, man. We need to have a war with them"? Oh, that's not Vaush. Yeah, Russia is evil. We need to have a war with them. Believe Big Pharma. Turn your neighbors into the FBI. Oh, but I vaguely capitalism bad. Capitalism bad, right? It is completely useless to criticize capitalism if it is not involved in any actual confrontation with the capitalist power structure. So even if he was right in what he was saying about me, it would still be a bullshit criticism. This is utopian. This is Socialism, Utopian and Scientific by Frederick Engels, a book I can guarantee you he's never read because it talks about all the things he doesn't know about, like overproduction, like the tendency of the falling rate of profit, like, capitalism leading to poverty amid abundance. All the things he never talks about are discussed in that thing, and it talks about how we need production upon a predetermined plan, etc. But in that book, it makes a clear distinction against what he calls utopian socialism, this vague idea that we need a more moral and ethical society, and scientific socialism that is about organizing the broad masses of people, the working class, against the private owners of capital, those who own the banks. Banks, he said banks, those who own the factories. Oh my God, factory owners, against those who run the state and the Pentagon, right? That we are trying to organize a real class struggle to serve the needs of real people. We're not just vaguely talking about how society could be more egalitarian. So by saying that you're not allowed to criticize the Pentagon, you're not allowed to criticize the White House, you're not allowed to criticize Big Pharma, you're not allowed to criticize any of these things, but you should just vaguely talk about capitalism is immoral, capitalism's no good. By doing that, he's basically saying you're not allowed to be a Marxist. He's saying it's perfectly fine to be one of these Christian socialist pastors that existed back in the day that talked about how, capitalism, it's not God's word. It's not, we should feed the hungry, but it's not good to actually organize unions. Marx organized labor unions. He built the International Working Men's Association. Marxism is about struggle and confrontation, and it means you call out and condemn and mobilize resistance to actual institutions of power, which Vaush doesn't believe in doing. And he says that anyone who does that is somehow a Nazi. Not only does he not do it, but he wants to cancel and silence and mobilize political repression along with the FBI against anyone who actually does those things. So at that point, you have to ask the question of, wow, you have to look at this and say, who is Vaush actually serving? When he says, the problem is that I don't just vaguely criticize capitalism, but I actually call out the rich and powerful institutions that actually run our society. Let's let him continue. Let him continue, because this is why I wanted to respond to this. This is so perfect, right? You just heard it from Vosh. I should just vaguely criticize capitalism, never criticize the capitalist institutions. And I do criticize capitalism all the time. And I actually understand what capitalism is. And I dig deeper into scientific Marxism than he ever has on his streams. Watch the Saxton lectures, for Christ's sake. Watch the video I made 2 days ago about overproduction. I mean, my God. But anyway, keep going. Keep going.
Yes, against these superstructures, against these policies, against these concepts, against these beliefs, against these institutions. Instead, he'll talk about Soros. He'll talk about Wall Street. It's very interesting, you know? Yeah, he never actually critiques the nature of capitalism, you know? Like, he talks about workers starving and everything, but none of his rhetoric is meaningfully different than what you would hear from any populist leader, regardless of their political affiliation. He'll talk about, like, the workers' struggle. But the workers' struggle to what? What world do you want to build? What system do you disagree with? What are the issues at hand here?
What do we ever want to organize? It's not like we have like a 4-point plan calling for public ownership of natural resources, public ownership of banking, a mobilization of infrastructure, and economic bill of rights. It's not like we actually want to build anything, right? I just get on here and rant about people being poor all the time. I mean, has he ever been to the website of the Center for Political Innovation? I mean, this is what I told you guys. This is the big lie. And if he can lie this blatantly and tell you, I don't advocate anything. I mean, if he can lie this blatantly, why should you believe anything else he says? I mean, this is someone who this is sociopathic level lying. He is saying things that either someone else just told him this and he believes them and he doesn't even know he's lying, or this guy is literally like a really dangerous psychopath. I never criticize policies. I never talk about what society we're trying to build. I mean, this is, you guys all know my work. You can go to cpiusa.org. You can watch the speeches I've been giving around the country for years. I think I do talk about all of these things, including the nature of capitalism and what we want to build.
What are we talking about, But we'll never know. He's convinced Soros is funding degrowth. Oh, you mean the thing that Nazis tend to believe? Soros funding degrowth in the Western world? Oh, you mean the thing that I only ever hear Nazis talk about?
Are Nazis going around talking about degrowth? This is an interesting point. Now, this shouldn't be our main point, but actually, Nazis tend to agree about degrowth. One of these Nazi groups, someone sent me a video they made that was directed at leftists, and they said, yeah, we need to degrow. And the problem is people in the third world need to have lower living standards, and that, that they want to reduce the population. Nazism is all about degrowth. They believe in overpopulation. They believe in eugenics. They believe in all kinds of degrowth stuff. Also, I don't think I ever said Soros is funding it. Soros, he's a billionaire who was involved in mobilizing to overthrow the Soviet Union. So anyone who's a legitimate communist, right, should be critical of Soros, because he was key in helping bring down the Soviet Union, organizing color revolutions and destabilizing countries in the Eastern Bloc and bringing in neoliberal shock therapy economics. But, I talk about him quite a bit, but I don't say he's funding degrowth. There's quite a few capitalists that are funding degrowth, but, Soros might be involved for all I know. But I don't think I say that. And I also don't think Nazis say that, because Nazis tend to be in favor of degrowth. In fact, a lot of these shooters have been eco-fascists, environmental fascists, right? They're motivated by wanting to stop global warming, wanting to reduce the population. So there you go. He's just wrong on that point. Writing it down. But let's carry on, folks. Let's carry on. Let's get through it. We got to just keep stomaching it. And
yeah, I don't know what his solution is. All I know is that it'll be final. So is he really unironically just
Yeah, he doesn't know what my solution is. I don't just have it on the CPI website. I've not written all kinds of books about what I want. No, I just want to put people in gas chambers. I just want the final solution. Now, as we keep going, it'll be very, very obvious. But has Vosh ever debated anyone without equating them to Nazis? Ever debated anyone? It all just gets back to Nazis with him. There's Nazis on. Hey, you all still there? Wow, this is interesting. This is very interesting. Not sure what's going on here, but there we go. Anyhow, as I was saying, can you all still hear me? Yeah, there's Nazis under every rock. And that's what he talks about, right? That's all he talks about is everyone's a Nazi. Everyone he disagrees with is a Nazi. We're pulling the video back up, folks. Don't worry. Everyone he disagrees with is Nazi. He makes comparisons to the Third Reich constantly. We're gonna get
but
to that.
that's the reason why his rhetoric is what it is. He has the simultaneous goal of disrupting intra-Western political.
During the Lincoln-Douglas debates, Lincoln said some pretty racist things.
Now, let's roll it back.
Capitalist. What he is anti-West. He really unironically just a Nazi?
Alrighty.
I mean, the thing that Nazis tend to believe. Soros funding degrowth in the Western world. Oh, you mean the thing that I only ever hear Nazis talk about?
Nazis believe in degrowth.
Yeah, I don't know what his solution is. All I know is that it'll be final.
My solution's on the Center for Political Innovation website.
Well, the real thing is that, like, Caleb Maupin's politics are dictated by the political needs of the Kremlin. The Kremlin is a fascist organization. There's no getting around that. It's also a capitalist one, so he's not anti-capitalist. What he is anti-West. But because he's a...
Isn't that what white supremacists are always going around doing, is ranting against Western civilization, wanting to tear down European civilization? What is it that the Proud Boys chant at their rallies? Isn't it, West is the worst? No, West is the worst. West is the worst. No, it doesn't sound right to me. Oh, yeah, it's West is the best. West is the best. Neo-Nazis and white supremacists are always going around defending Western civilization, defending Western colonialism, defending Western capitalism. Meanwhile, Russia and China are going around empowering people in Africa and Asia and building infrastructure and raising people up out of poverty. I think he's got a little bit wrong there about what it is Nazis are doing. Nazis are not anti-Western. Nazis are not anti-European. That's kind of what racial white supremacist politics is all about, is defending the West and Western civilization. So there you go.
West and a fascist. What that means is that when he tries to agitate within the West to get people to hate their own government, which is advantageous to a different geopolitical bloc, he does so by appealing to the right. And the best way to convince the right that they should be anti-American is by convincing the right that America is controlled by Jews or whatever. It's just the easiest, it's just the path of least resistance, you know? But that's the reason why his rhetoric is what it is. He has the simultaneous goal of disrupting intra-Western political discourse and getting people to be supportive of Russian geopolitical interests, while also making sure that that support is framed through a conservative or fascist context.
Over the course.
Is that what I do? I'm always just going around trying to build support for exclusively right-wing movements. Is that what I'm always doing? Let me show you. I'm going to pull up on the screen here. This is actually an article. This was in Cleveland Scene magazine in 2010. There was an article all about me and my work against police brutality in Cleveland. You can go read it. The Commies Next Door. And it's all about how I was organizing against police brutality with Black on Black Crime Incorporated, Art McCoy, with people in revolutionary African-American groups. I was doing that long before it was cool and hip and trendy, long before Black Lives Matter had ever been tweeted. There was a hit piece against me on the local news claiming that a local Marxist was trying to incite riots against in the Black community, against the police. So this is just, this is just malarkey. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's like, was I arrested at Occupy Wall Street? Was that why I got arrested in Occupy Wall Street protests? Because I exclusively go to right-wing demonstrations and protests. Is that what that's about? Here, let's pull up some video of me from Occupy Wall Street. Let's pull some video of that up, right? Since we're doing that, right? This is before Occupy Wall Street, when I had long hair. I was part of something called Bloombergville. I got some video of that. Up here. I was out in New York City. Tried to take over a bank robbery, booted out of the building. And this is me feeling exclusively the right-wing movement. This is me feeling exclusively the right-wing movement, running through the streets, and African-American folks, protesting, cut the budget, college barons. Yeah, that's you know, you can watch video of me almost getting arrested and getting into street scuffles and stuff. You know, with Occupy Wall Street. Yeah, that's because I only appeal to right-wing movements. This guy is just such a liar, such a liar. But let's continue because so next he actually plays me talking for a little bit, and this gets really special.
Of the U.S. Civil War, Abraham Lincoln changed. Abraham Lincoln did not want to abolish slavery. That is a fact. Abraham Lincoln really, really wanted to keep slavery intact. He just wanted to not have the federal government accommodate slavery. He felt that slavery was wrong, but he didn't want to mess with the South and their slave system. He just didn't want it to expand. And during his debates, during the Lincoln-Douglas debates, Lincoln said some pretty racist things. You know, he said, well, just because I'm against slavery doesn't mean I believe black people are equal, etc. He said some pretty racist things. But Lincoln took office, and the slaveholders took up guns and tried to overthrow the government. So Lincoln was forced to build a coalition with the abolitionists and with Harriet Tubman and with Frederick Douglass and with the labor unions. And in the process of building that coalition, Lincoln changed. Lincoln changed. Lincoln's views shifted. W.E.B. Du Bois, the great Marxist scholar, writes about this. And even though Lincoln came into office trying to hold off a civil war, trying to not abolish slavery, he was forced by historical conditions to actually abolish slavery. He was forced by historical conditions to align with slave revolution.
None of this is anything that anyone on the far right would ever say, right? I just want to talk about this. The fact that he can sit there and hear me talking this way, talking about W.E.B. Du Bois and Lincoln and the coalition to abolish slavery and talk about all these things he hears me talking about. But somehow he just maintains that, nope, Caleb is secretly a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He's Sig Heiling the white race and wanting to kill all Jews. I mean, he doesn't. I mean, is he this stupid? I mean, I'm giving the Marxist line on the Civil War. Go and read William Z. Foster's Outline Political History of the Americas. That's what they talk about. Go and read Black Reconstruction by W.E.B. Du Bois. That's what they talk about. Go and read The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. That's what they talk about. But the fact that he's sitting there hearing me espousing the Marxist history, I mean, does he not notice that the Confederacy is what the white supremacists support? White supremacists are going around defending Confederate monuments, Vosh, not Lincoln. White supremacists are going around saying that the Confederacy was good. They're going around arguing that somehow the Confederates are good and trying to defend their monuments. Did he sleep through that? Did he sleep through that? There we go. I'll write this down. All right. Now it does. It's attacking Tom. Anyway, we'll keep going. So he's watching me just go over the standard Marxist line on the Civil War, which is that Lincoln, despite his racist tendencies, was forced by material conditions to join arm in arm with a progressive movement led by Marxists to defeat slavery. With Harriet Tubman, with the labor movement, with others, that Karl Marx endorsed Lincoln. I'm going over all these historical facts from a clearly progressive perspective. And he's sitting there and, he's just decided, Caleb must be a white supremacist, even though I'm saying the standard Marxist interpretation of the U.S. Civil War.
Like Frederick Douglass, to align with Marxists even, and have Joseph Wedemeyer, a Marxist,
part of
be a leader of his military, have August Willich become a brigadier general in his army. Struggle changes people. It's material conditions that lead to...
Yeah, so basically what he's saying right now is that if you're a revolutionary or far left or a Marxist, that working with people who don't fully agree with you but are willing to work with you is a good idea.
Yep, that is what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying, and I'm right about that.
Then why is he against working with the Squad and with the Democratic Party, I wonder?
All right.
Wait, hold on.
Hold on, folks. Gotta pull up another picture. Why am I against working with the Squad and the Democratic Party? All right, hold on, folks. Hold on. Do you see that picture, folks? That is AOC. And do you know who is in the far corner there? That's me. And that was before AOC was anybody. That was at a Bernie Sanders meetup. That was just after AOC had announced her candidacy, long before she'd won the primary. I was meeting with AOC at a bar in Brooklyn with other Bernie Sanders supporters. So I was not against the Squad. I was not against Bernie. In fact, I knew AOC before she was AOC, you fucking lying piece of shit. I have photo evidence of it. I knew AOC before she was AOC. So give me a break. Give me a break. Why doesn't he ever work with them? I tried to like AOC. And in fact, I even defended AOC long more than she deserved. I was an admirer of AOC. I knew people who worked in her campaign office. And you'll recall after she let us down on supporting the Bolivian coup, and after she let us down supporting Tibet separatism, and I've been to AOC's town hall meetings. I tried my hardest to like AOC, but she made it abundantly clear that she was pro-imperialist. And when Force the Vote got going, it became clear, that anyone who supported Jimmy Dore, the AOC crowd, were calling them Nazis, and how dare you ever if you actually want Medicare for all, the squad crowd was calling you a Nazi, and they support, hostility to Russia and China, and you couldn't support them anymore. But my record of supporting AOC and my record of supporting Bernie, quite long, folks, quite long. And in fact, while we're at it, so he says, I never supported AOC. Never supported AOC, right? We'll just show you again. That's me with AOC before she was AOC, at a Bernie Sanders meetup. I knew AOC long before he'd ever heard of her. I think I did support AOC. But while we're at it, why don't we talk about, we've got a video here. This is me when Bernie Sanders launched his campaign. Now, this is me when Bernie launched his campaign. In Brooklyn, when he launched his presidential campaign in 2020. This is where I was. And take a look at this. Take a look at this.
Folks, we're here outside of Brooklyn College. We're going to talk to some Bernie Sanders supporters. What a day, huh? A lot of people. Why do you support Bernie Sanders?
Because... Well, I think he's one of the few candidates that are taking on corporations. He's not taking on corporate cash, and that's pretty much it.
I support Bernie Sanders because the United States is in a huge crisis right now, and whoever tells themselves that it's not, is loony. We need changes to our education system. We need changes to our medical system. We need changes to our criminal system. We need changes to all kinds of things. And the most important word, and the thing that he brought up that this country needs right now more than ever, is justice on all fronts. Justice. And that's why I support Bernie Sanders for the United States 2020. We're going to make it happen. My generation and generations around us, we're going to make it happen this time. No jokes.
And what does socialism mean to you?
Socialism is just a blanket term. It's used to frighten us. It's used to frighten other people about becoming like Venezuela, becoming like Poland, becoming all kinds of things. But in the heart of hearts, socialism is the idea that people provide for the things that the people get from. We put into it and we get out from it. I am not saying I'm a socialist. I'm not saying that this is socialism. I'm saying that to everything there's layers. Corruption comes in many forms. It comes in capitalist forms and socialist forms and every kind of form. And if we can keep corruption out, that's what matters. Don't get caught up with the blanket terms.
I owe $80,000 in debt.
Yeah.
And
it's a rip-off. In most countries, it's free to go to
And
college.
I don't even know how I'm going to pay it off, but I had to pay $80,000 just to get a normal job. By the time I'm done paying it, I'm going to be able to have to buy a house. It's pretty difficult to actually live on Long Island, especially in New York, having to pay property taxes, and then also have to pay off $80,000 just to be able to have like a decent living.
Yeah. And what does socialism mean to you?
Well, I believe it's also kind of misunderstood. He's not really, favoring a socialist government. He's favoring ideologies that basically means that society provides for things, including education and healthcare. Socialism is a society should be providing for itself, not specific individuals being able to benefit from our tax dollars, but us uniting and actually getting the money that we put in back.
I think this whole socialism, capitalism,
Anyway, yeah, so when he tells you that I never had anything to do, I was talking positive about AOC and Bernie much longer than they deserved it. I'll tell you that much. And when I didn't break with them until it became clear that they wanted to be our enemies. So he's just lying about that. He's lied to you so far. You've seen him lie and claim I never criticize capitalism. Lie. You've seen him lie and say that. You've seen him lie and say that I never supported any progressive movement. That's clearly a lie. I've shown you that I was part of Occupy Wall Street. I've shown you how my police brutality activism was so well respected and admired that the press had to comment on me in Cleveland. There were hit pieces, there were articles defending me, etc. I've showed you that he lied furthermore and claimed that somehow me supporting Lincoln and that me, opposing Western capitalism is somehow fascist, when actually fascists oppose Lincoln and support the Confederacy, and actually fascists tend to celebrate Western civilization. So, do you see how many times he's lied so far in this clip? I mean, why does anyone listen to this liar? I don't know why anyone does, but listen, I've got a super chat to write down, and then we'll get on with the rest of this, because there's so many here. I mean, hey, Caleb, what do you think about Pico, California, and its relationship? I don't know anything about that, Michael. I can't answer you because I don't know anything about it. All right. Next question, or not next question, next clip. Continue, Bosch. Continue your lies.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. I'm noticing a bit of a contradiction. If his argument here is that introducing left-leaning values into organizations with which we share some things in common, in Lincoln's case, the abolition of slavery, then why is he so fervently opposed to any kind of electoral or political support or coalition building with the largest liberal majority in the country, which does agree with us on at least some basic things?
I just proved over and over and over again that I did give support to Bernie Sanders. I did give support to AOC. I was involved in the protests
certainly
brutality. I was involved in the protests, of Occupy Wall Street. I mean, he just lies like this. Now, do you see how blatantly he's lying here? He just says these things. He's done zero research into who I am. And he just decides, his dad told him, I guess, or whoever told him to say all these things about me. I'm 34 years old, folks. I've been around a long time. I've got receipts. I mean, if someone can lie this blatantly, why should you believe them about anything else?
Have currently. It's almost like none of this means anything. What he's basically doing right now is saying, hey, leftists used to side with Abraham Lincoln, so now why don't we side with Donald Trump? That's what he's actually saying. We used to work with the most progressive option at the time to achieve political goals that we shared. So to celebrate that legacy, I think that we should also work together with fascists to achieve fascist goals.
Yeah. I never endorsed Donald Trump. I never voted for Donald Trump. I screamed and yelled against Donald Trump for murdering Qasem Soleimani. I screamed and yelled against Donald Trump's anti-immigrant policies and the kids in cages. You can watch the videos on immigration that I made. I was a harsh critic of Donald Trump from the beginning. From the beginning. He just makes these things up. And it's like, in his mind, anyone who's not marching in lockstep, obediently following Biden, like him, is somehow working for Trump. He can't break out of the capitalist duality. In his mind, he is trying, he just reinforces this. You're either for Trump or you're for Biden. You can't be an actual socialist. In his mind, you're not allowed to be an actual socialist. The only way you're allowed to be a socialist is to be a pro-war, pro-establishment guy like him. And if you're anything but that, somehow this means you're supporting Trump, which I clearly never did. Watch me scream and yell against Donald Trump about Qasem Soleimani. Watch me scream and yell about his anti-immigrant policies. Give me a break. What a lying sack of shit.
I am very smart.
Great revolutions and great moments in history. And in the course of those events, people change. There's a lot of those truckers that were marching against the mandates, not because they're racist or they're Ku Klux.
Literally, word to word, Abraham Lincoln and the Canadian Freedom Convoy. Yes, two countries, two people, one struggle. Perfectly comparable.
Klan or they're Anglo-Saxon supremacists because they're mad about the mandates and they're mad about the economic conditions that they're facing. And my belief is that those truckers can change also. That the intervention of revolutionaries to show them that the problem isn't socialism, the problem isn't just Justin Trudeau, it's the whole capitalist imperialist system, that Russia and China and Venezuela...
Oh, wait! I never criticized the whole capitalist imperialist system. And I just said we need to show them that it's the capitalist imperialist system. And yes, Abraham Lincoln being very, very racist, but standing up to the slaveholders and the Wall Street bankers that were making profits from insuring the slave ships and the British Empire that wanted the cheap cotton for their textile mills. Yes, Abraham Lincoln having racist backward ideas, but standing up to big corporations. And the Canadian truckers, a lot of whom are libertarian or right-wing, but were standing up against the mandates and big pharma and challenging the Canadian imperialist state. Yes, that is comparable. That struggle changes people. This is what Marxism is all about, that people change through struggle. That's a completely valid point. And I just said in the thing that the goal should be to get people to see the problem is capitalism and imperialism, which he says I never said. This guy is an utter liar.
And Cuba are their allies against the global monopolists and imperialists. The intervention of revolutionaries can be key in changing people. When contradictions exist in society, it is the duty of revolutionaries to intervene in those moments and push a revolutionary message. And in that struggle against the slaveholders and their uprisings, revolutionaries intervened, and Abraham Lincoln changed. By meeting with Frederick Douglass, by aligning with the labor movement, Abraham Lincoln's views shifted over the course of the...
It's like, this is all stuff that no white supremacist would ever say, mind you, right? This Marxist understanding of the Civil War is all something that nobody who is on the far right or an advocate of white supremacism would ever talk the way I talk. And the fact that he knows that I'm clearly not on the right, but he's saying this because this is his job. His job is to smear and use his platform to try and destroy the lives and reputations of all dissident leftists. I mean, it shows you, I mean, I'm sorry, but anyone who hears me talking that way knows that I'm pretty clearly not on the right.
Mao and the Chinese Communist Party, first they worked within the KMT government. They were part of the KMT party. They didn't even have their own party. They were a faction within the KMT party. But then violence was perpetrated against them, so they fled to the countryside and they waged People's War. Then Japan invaded, so they entered a military alliance against the Japanese invaders. And then after that, they still tried to have a...
Yeah, and it's like, how much you want to bet Vauchenet doesn't even know any of this history? You know, he's been appointed by Twitter and YouTube and Twitch to be the voice of socialism on the internet. This is like he's hearing this for the first time. Oh, Mao aligned with Japan? Oh, Marx endorsed Lincoln? Why does anyone listen to this pile of garbage?
Coalition government. But when it became clear there was no other choice, it became clear that Chiang Kai-shek was going to slaughter them and murder them. The people of China had no other choice but to defend their liberated territories and their land reform by having an armed revolution. And that this is how conscious revolutionaries operate. They go where the struggle is. They go where confrontations are existing. They go where working people see their interests as being contrary to the state. They go where working people are in motion. And they organize them, and they lead them, and they give them political direction. And this is how history works. And in order to actually understand this, you have to be able to talk to people. You can't say that you're against America and you want to destroy America. You can say, no, we love this country. We love the people of this country, but this country was founded on slavery. This country was founded on the genocide of the native people. This country was founded in an impure way, and it's cursed. There's a curse hanging over U.S. society. And that we need the country...
A curse hanging over U.S. society from slavery, and that the country is cursed, and the country is founded in an impure way, and that we need solidarity and anti-racism to overcome this. Why would any white supremacist ever say anything like this? I've studied this stuff in great depth, folks. I understand Marxism. He doesn't.
Refounded upon new values. We need the country to be reborn on new values of compassion and brotherhood and solidarity.
Yeah, refounding the country. I thought my only solution was the final solution. And I mean, can you see how dishonest this man is, right? I mean, he should really be put in prison. If not for his child pornography habit, he should be put in prison for defamation of character, right? I mean, he is using his platform. He wants to get me killed, right? When you go out and call someone a Nazi or a white supremacist, you're essentially trying to get them killed, right? He goes on his streams, he supports Antifa, he says the only good fascist is a dead one. And then he tries to tell his followers that me, somebody who has been fighting police brutality since before Black Lives Matter was ever tweeted, somebody who has been arrested in progressive demonstrations, he's trying to incite violence to me, against me, so much so that I have to hire security to come to my events. This guy is a vicious fascist, if there ever was one, right? He's a vicious fascist. Very good. Writing it down. All right, continue.
Ultimately.
All right, so it was number 3. That's the answer, right? A long, bloviating, self-aggrandizing rant that doesn't actually address anything that Unruh said, but instead, equating the struggle of abolitionism under Lincoln to the Freedom Convoy truckers or whatever.
Yes, a struggle against big capital that was supporting the mandates and supporting the big pharma, led by people with backward views, and a struggle against big capital like the big corporations and banks and the British Empire and the slave owners who supported slavery, and someone who had backward views, a racist like Abraham Lincoln. It's a completely fair comparison to make. People with backward ideas come into confrontation with the powers that be, and instead of just writing them off, Marxists have a responsibility to go to such people and win them to a revolutionary line instead of just writing them off. That's not what Vaush wants to do. He just wants people to work for Joe Biden. He doesn't want things to actually change. Your job is to defend Joe Biden,
to defend Joe Biden from conservatives, right? He doesn't actually believe in socialism. He believes in maybe an employee stock option program. And also there's a bunch of bad people out there, bad people that are conservative, and they all need to be killed and murdered, and you can't try to change their minds, and they all just need to be killed and murdered because they're conservatives. I mean, this guy is an idiot. Not to trail behind them, gesticulating and criticizing. Our job is not to stand in the way and oppose them. Our job is to march at their head and lead them. And it's only a matter of time before the American people are rising. The gas prices are through the roof. The food prices are through the roof. Homelessness is rising. They're criminalizing homeless people across this country. And at this point, the American people are angry. They're angry at Wall Street. They're angry at the Pentagon. They're angry at the big banks and corporations. And our job as conscious revolutionaries is to find a way to get the American people who are angry at this government, who are angry at the big banks and corporations. Like he pretends to be an expert on me, but watch his face. He's clearly, this is the first time he's ever heard me say this. I say that on my streams over and over and over again, that we must align the people of the world and their struggle against imperialism with the US working class and their struggle against big corporations. That's my mantra. I say that over and over and over again because that is the conscious job of revolutionaries living in the heart of the empire, is to build anti-imperialist solidarity, working class struggle against the big monopolies and corporations, against the imperialists, right? And he's seen me say this. He's never heard this before in his life. He's never heard anyone say this, not just me. He's never heard anyone say this. This guy claims to be an expert on Marxism. He has no clue what the people who marched against the Vietnam War and waved the flag of the Vietnamese were talking about. He has no clue what the Black Panthers were standing for and why Fred Hampton admired Kim Il-sung and why the Black Panthers waved the little red book around. He has no clue about any of this. None, right? And he's watching me say it, and he thinks he's an expert on what I believe. He's never even heard what I stand for. He's been given the assignment of smearing me. And he's sitting there like a deer in the headlights, like a deer in the headlights, listening to me and going, okay, my job is to convince people he's a Nazi so he gets murdered. Okay, so how can I find a way to make this Nazi when it clearly isn't? What a pile of garbage. To understand that they have a common destiny and a common ally in the people of Iran, the people of Russia, the people of
Iran. Jesus. Yeah, okay, so his shilling aside.
Yeah, right. The people of Iran, who had a brutal US-backed dictator, the Shah of Iran, imposed on them, who were trained by the CIA, the Shah's secret police, Savak, tortured people. And every Iranian has a family member or a relative who got tortured by Savak. Iran, that the British Empire imposed a famine on them and killed millions of people during the Second World War, and food didn't get into Iran, and children and babies died from malnutrition because of US imperialism. Iran, that suffers under sanctions imposed by the United States. People can't get the medicine they need to live. The idea that they might have a common destiny with the American workers who are struggling against big corporations, he finds that to be laughable. Seriously, he just laughed. I said the people of Iran that are being sanctioned and threatened with nuclear attack by the US imperialists, that have had brutal dictatorships imposed on them, that have been, have been subjected to horrendous crimes by the British imperialists and the American imperialists. The Iranian people might have a common destiny with the American workers and the people struggling at Amazon and the people struggling to pay their bills right now, the people who lose their homes and jobs because of healthcare, people crippled for life with student debt. The fact that the American people and their struggle against the big corporations and the struggle of the Iranian people against US imperialism, the fact that they might have a common destiny is something he thinks is so crazy that he's going to laugh at it. Seriously, this is who people think they should listen to Marxism about, right? He thinks it's funny, right? He thinks the fact that Iran has had to send its soldiers to Syria to fight ISIS because they don't want Islamic terrorism funded by the United States to spill over into Iran and kill people. I mean, I was in a graveyard in Iran. I talked to family members who were burying their relatives, their Iranian sons who had fought on the battlefield in Syria against ISIS and against Al-Qaeda. And they said to me, aren't Americans, you guys hate Al-Qaeda also. Why is your government supporting ISIS? And why is Iran having to go fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda on the battlefield while your government is more focused on destabilizing Syria? I mean, how in the world? This guy, he thinks it's funny. He thinks it's funny, the idea that the big corporations and banks and the Pentagon and the military-industrial complex might have a common enemy in the American working class and in the people of Iran? Like, does he know anything?
Does he know anything? But no, as we get on with this clip, we're going to hear what it's all about. So there you go. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Felonious Punk. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
He is correct in the sense that it's the responsibility of leftists to agitate and to coordinate leftist sentiment when the proletariat is upset with the status quo.
No kidding. Oh.
Like, he doesn't believe anything that he's saying right now. If he actually believed this, then he would be in favor of democratic entryism. He would be in favor of people working within the Democratic Party to move liberals over to a state of, like, radical leftism. But he's not.
Oh, good night. I mean, Jesus, I was arrested in Occupy Wall Street protests. I was organizing in Cleveland. I risked my life on a ship from Iran trying to bring medical aid to Yemen. I mean, I don't believe any of this, right? I work for Russian media to spread the truth at a time when we're in an anti-Russian overdrive. I don't believe any of this, huh? I mean, my God, what has he ever done if he believes in all of this? What, he just plays video games and farts in his pants while he sits in Beverly Hills? I mean, give me a break. Do I really believe? I don't believe a word I'm saying. And I put my body on the line, you piece of shit. I've actually taken risks. I've made great sacrifices. There's people in my family I don't talk to because of this. You realize, I mean, my God, who is this guy? What has he ever done in his life to tell me I don't believe in this stuff? What has he ever done in his life? And I was with AOC in that video. You'll see I was with AOC long before she was AOC. I mean, I was talking to Bernie people at the opening day of the rally. Who does he think he is to tell me he doesn't believe in this? I clearly believe in it. He doesn't.
He exclusively advocates in favor of and supports far-right movements in the West.
Yeah. Occupy Wall Street was not a far-right movement. Black Lives Matter, not a far-right movement. Chris Smalls and the Amazon Struggle, Center for Political Innovation. We have this placard about Chris Smalls. Give me a break.
And that's it. He's not consistent on the political entryism thing. He is consistent on the far right.
Yes, I am consistent. Not only do I oppose the police brutally murdering African Americans, but I also say, despite the fact that I disagree with what she was doing, and I think she was absolutely wrong to be doing what she was doing, that the police shouldn't have murdered Ashley Babbitt, right? I am consistent. I think that just because a police officer is angry at an unarmed person, he doesn't have the right to pull his gun out and murder them. And that applies to Amadou Diallo, and that applies to George Floyd, and that applies to Ramarley Graham, and that also applies to Ashley Babbitt. I am consistent in this. I don't support police state repression against the working class, and I don't support wars. I don't support Bush invading Iraq. I don't support Obama bombing Libya. I don't support Trump attacking and taking us to the brink of war, attacking Syria, murdering Qasem Soleimani, and I don't support Biden escalating a proxy war in Ukraine and trying to get as many Ukrainians killed as he can to make a point against Russia. I'm actually consistent. He's not. He doesn't oppose wars unless they're done by Republicans, and I'm not even sure he opposes them then. But there you go. I'm actually consistent. And thank you, Felonious Punk. I'm actually consistent, and he is a shill for the Democrats.
It's really that simple. Also, his analysis is leaving out the fact that just because people are...
Is he reading a script?
Being radicalized does not mean that they are being radicalized by economic conditions. If that was the case, after the Great Depression, Weimar Germany would have turned into a socialist republic.
Oh,
but it didn't.
Does he know anything about German history? I mean, he's always calling everybody a Nazi, and he doesn't know anything about German history. The Weimar Republic, 1920s, and the economic conditions there were huge communist groups and huge socialist groups. And the Social Democrats infamously betrayed the 1918 revolution, and there were so many factors that ultimately led to the Nazis taking power to prevent a communist revolution and crushing the workers' movement and outlawing the labor unions. I mean, how can he say that? How can he sit there and say, I mean, he's always calling everyone's a Nazi. Has he ever opened a German history book? Hitler's main enemy was Ernst Thälmann and the KPD. So how in the world can he sit there and say, oh, why didn't Weimar Germany lead to socialism? Because
the British and the Americans like Henry Ford backed Hitler to make sure it didn't, you fucking idiot. Because of the German Social Democratic Party that sold the revolution down the river and murdered Rosa Luxemburg. What is wrong with this man? I mean, if everyone's a Nazi, you'd think he would know something about Nazis. I mean, it seems like all this guy knows is the, well, never mind. We'll keep watching. All right.
Did it? Instead, it turned into a government that Caleb Maupin actually would have liked to have lived in.
Oh, shut up. The Donetsk People's Republic, the people of Venezuela, the people of Nicaragua,
Donetsk People's Republic.
And that the struggle globally against U.S. imperialism and the struggle domestically against big banks and corporations and the Pentagon is one struggle. The people of the world must unite to defeat
See
U.S.
his face there? He's
Ooh,
never
that is
heard
our
this
job.
before.
And we won't do it by saying we want to tear down and destroy the country and we hate everyone here and they're all a bunch of Euro settlers. And we won't do it. We won't do it by going around advocating violence. No, we want to do our job. We take this seriously, Jason. This isn't an internet LARP. This isn't performative politics. This is serious. People are hungry. People are dying. People are suffering. I've been around the world. I've met with real anti-imperialists around the world. And I take this job very, very, very seriously. I think about the people of Yemen that are getting bombed with U.S.-made bombs pouring in from Saudi Arabia. I think about the people of the eastern regions, Donetsk and Lugansk, that have been bombarded by U.S. imperialists, allies, and the Azov.
My people go out to the victims of imperialism everywhere. The
Yeah.
Russian people.
Peoples of eastern Ukraine, 14,000 of which have died since 2014. And there was the Minsk Agreement, which was supposed to recognize their rights and reintegrate them back into Ukraine. But instead, they've been bombing, and killing those people. Has he seen the monument to all the children in the Donbass region who have died, children hiding in their basements since 2014? Oh, but it wasn't on CNN, was it? It wasn't on CNN, so he doesn't care about them. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris never told him to care about those people. So suddenly now, on command, he has empathy for the people of Ukraine, which I have empathy for too, but he doesn't care about, and he laughs about the suffering of the people of the Russian-speaking regions. Russia has taken in millions of immigrants from the eastern regions, people who've fled their homes since 2014 because of what the United States has imposed on Ukraine after the 2014 Euromaidan coup. But he just laughs about it, just like he laughs about the Iranian people and their struggle against imperialism. This guy is a vicious supporter of U.S. imperialism. Right? I mean, he thinks the fact that Russian-speaking children and people in the eastern regions have been hiding in their basements, he thinks that monument, I'm going to pull that monument up, right? This is who Vosh is laughing at. I want you to all see who Vosh is laughing at. I want you to all see this, right? I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to pull it up. I want you to see what Vosh thinks is so funny. He just thinks it's so hilarious, so funny, right? We're going to pull it up. This is Vosh's idea of something just so funny, Look at this, right? Look at this, right? Look at this, right? Here we go, right? I'm going to show you. Vosh thinks that this is a joke. He thinks that this is a big joke, big joke. Okay. Yep. Now that's a memorial that they have in Donbass. You see those stuffed animals? All of those names on there are children under the age of 12 who died at the hands of the U.S. armed, U.S. backed regime in Kiev installed in 2014. And they all died on Ukrainian soil in the Donetsk People's Republic, in the Lugansk People's Republic. And he thinks that this is funny because CNN never told him about it. So it's just funny, right? Since 2014, people have been dying in the eastern regions of Ukraine. And Vosh thinks it's funny. He thinks it's hilarious, right? He just thinks it's a big joke and he just laughs it off. What a sick person. I mean, Vosh is the kind of person that would have attended lynchings back in the day. You know, he's the kind of person who would have gone to the lynchings and laughed as they strung up somebody and poured gasoline on their body. That's the kind of sick person he is. He thinks what the Iranian people have endured is a big joke. He thinks what the people of the Donbass regions have endured is a big joke. I mean, he's the kind of person that would have gone to lynchings. I am convinced, right? You know, he goes after dissidents. Basically, his whole job is to try and bully, threaten, and harass dissidents. This is the kind of person who would have gone to the Roman Colosseum and watched Christians be eaten by lions, right? I mean, that's the kind of sick, evil person he is. He admires the powerful. He admires Joe Biden. He admires Kamala Harris. He admires the Pentagon. He admires big tech, and he hates people who question authority, people who think for themselves. He hates people in Iran or people in Russia or people in Venezuela or people in Cuba who assert their independence, and he enjoys watching them be killed. What a sick person.
In East Ukraine, yeah. Okay, you know how there really wasn't that much of a fundamental ideological difference between Stalinist Russia and, like, Nazi Germany in terms of, like, their belief of the nation state and the suppression of the people in favor of, like, the common will?
Oh, good God. There was no difference ideologically between Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia. Oh, good Lord. I mean, I don't know. Then why did the communists, starting in 1935, have a policy of building a popular front against fascism? Why did communists from all over the world go to Spain to fight against Franco? Why did thousands of Americans go to Spain to fight fascism? Why were communists in the United States organizing to stop lynchings and, you know, marching in support of the Scottsboro Nine? Jesus, why? I mean, you know, why did the Battle of Cable Street happen, where communists went out to fight Oswald Mosley in Britain? You know, there's no difference. I mean, why were the Nazis trying to restore the past? And, you know, talking about, you know, they had a Third Reich and they were trying to go back to the past and they were all into Wagner and knights and swords, while the communists were promoting science fiction and technology and human progress. Why were the Nazis trying to reduce their population and sterilize people and prevent them from breeding and breed people like animals with eugenics, while the Soviet Union was promoting the languages of oppressed nationalities, making sure that every one of those nationalities in the Soviet Union had a written language, promoting their language in order to grant national autonomy? Give me a break. I mean, how can he say these things? How can he say these things? Why was the Nazi state promoting philosophical irrationalism in Nietzsche, while the Soviet state was promoting dialectical and historical materialism in Marxism? There was a huge ideological difference between them. This is just something that he thinks he can say, and he assumes that his audience doesn't know anything about it. Marxism, socialism, the ideology of Albert Einstein, the ideology of W.E. Du Bois, you know, the ideology of anti-racist fighters, Langston Hughes, Paul Robeson, was very, very different than the ideology of the Nazis, than the ideology of the Ku Klux Klan, the ideology of white supremacists, the ideology of Mussolini fascism. I mean, for him to make those kind of statements really just shows you how out of touch with reality he is. But we're going to get to more of this. I know this has been a long stream, but it's good because these are important topics to talk about, you know? So there you go.
Obviously, like, stuff about, like, race and specifics is different, but in terms of some fundamentals there, you know.
I think there were some more things than just race. You know, there's the whole belief in historical progress. There's the empowerment of historically marginalized and oppressed peoples. You know, there's the empowerment of women and, you know, bringing women into the workforce and the empowerment of Soviet women and granting access to birth control. You know, I mean, oh man, there's, you know, futurism. There's a lot of ways that the pessimistic Nazi regime founded on Nietzsche and Übermenschen and will to power, and the Soviet state founded on Marxism, Leninism, were completely at odds ideologically. And for him to make statements like that, I mean, you know, he is just a servant of U.S. imperialism.
They definitely lockstep. And how Soviet Russia was, like, very willing to work with Nazi Germany, and it was Nazi Germany that backed off that arrangement, funnily enough.
False. Yeah, the Nazi-Soviet Pact of 1939 was signed after the Soviet Union, starting in 1935, started trying to build a global united front and popular front against fascism. And all the communists of the world were mobilized to build anti-fascist popular fronts and coalitions. After Stalin and the Soviet government went to the British and wanted an anti-fascist alliance, and they wouldn't do it, went to the Americans and wanted an anti-fascist alliance, they wouldn't do it. Instead, they passed the Neutrality Act, and they, in addition to that, they went to the French, and briefly the French had an alliance with the Soviets. I don't know who that is. And briefly they had an alliance with the French, and then the French broke, and it was only in 1939, after the Soviet Union had spent 4 years trying to build a global anti-fascist coalition and gotten rejected, after the Soviet Union had been the only country other than Mexico to stand with the Spanish Republic against Franco and fascism, only then did they sign the Non-Aggression Pact, which was not an alliance, it was a non-aggression pact. So, I mean, how can you say they were more than willing? No, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939 was signed after the Western capitalist powers had made clear they did not want an alliance with the Soviets. And it was to buy time because they knew a Nazi invasion was inevitable.
I wonder, back during the years when the Soviet Union was part of the Axis, could you find like records of Stalinists all across the West arguing that it's the responsibility of the proletariat of the West to support Germany in their anti-imperialist fight against like international like Judaism or something? I actually wonder, right? Because if they were military allies, there were almost certainly Stalinists that were out there writing papers defending Soviet Union's decision to work with Nazi Germany. And if you went back and looked at that, a lot of that would probably be pleas to the proletariat to
Well, see, the Soviet Union was never part of the Axis, right? Like he just claimed. And on top of that, I have actually read the publications of the Communist Party from that time. He has not. And if he actually read them, he would know that. He would read, you go read The Way Out by Earl Browder. That was the 1940 presidential campaign book in which he is taking a position supporting the non-aggression pact and pushing kind of pacifism. There's not a single defense of the Nazis in any Communist Party publication. There is at that point, while the pact was going on and they were trying to hold off war and it wasn't clear exactly how things would go down, there is some some pacifist arguments put forward, but no, there was not a single defense of Hitler in any Communist Party publication, because Hitler murdered all the communists, because Hitler was preaching extreme racism and was, preaching that his main goal was to rid the world of Bolshevism. And if he actually read the writings of the Communist Party from that period, if he actually read that stuff, he wouldn't say stupid, outrageous things like he's currently saying. All right. Okay, Marxist view of the French Revolution. So yeah, I mean, it's utterly shocking that he can say things like this. I mean, no, there's not such writings, because the Nazis were not anti-imperialists. They had been stripped of their colonies after World War I, and then Hitler took power with an authoritarian Bonapartist regime aligned with big industrialists, and they tried to seize their colonies, right? So there you go.
Understand the need to fight back against Western capitalism, right? I feel like you could find that.
Well, you can't.
I should have someone look for that sometime, or look for it myself.
You should actually read it. You should actually
they were
know
allies
what you're talking
for like
about
a good
before you get on here and tell hundreds of thousands of people what you think it is.
Like a good while, It's not like it was just 1 month. I mean, they would have had time to produce that propaganda in joint.
Yeah, why don't you actually go read The Way Out by Earl Browder? Why don't you actually go listen to? I actually have on this channel, I've got a campaign speech from Earl Browder from the 1940 election, where he calls for creating a Washington, Moscow, Beijing axis to be against both the Nazis and the British. Battalion in Ukraine for so long. I think about the people of South and Central America who are fleeing because their countries have been devastated, but I also think about the working people of Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan and Arizona and Texas and how they've been devastated, and I see the potential for an...
Also, slight point here, noteworthy that he chose, like, red states for that. I don't know.
Yeah. Red states are suffering economically, my friend. Maybe you didn't notice that the reason that Donald Trump got elected is because a lot of people in red states are economically suffering and losing their jobs and devastated. And only the right wing has been able to capture the economic anger that people feel, because the left wing is full of shills like him that are just defending the status quo. And yes, I am concerned about people in red states because their anger at the big corporations and banks, etc., the only people that seem to be paying any attention to them are conservatives. The left is dominated by pieces of shit like you who say that basically the status quo must be defended, that anyone who actually criticizes capitalism is a Nazi. It's a concern of mine that the Rust Belt, the people who've lost their jobs and are economically devastated, people from small towns like mine, they're suffering. And the only people that are trying to channel their anger into politics are on the right. And it doesn't bother him. He just wants to exterminate them all. All right. It's interesting that Bosch supports Nazis in Ukraine while calling on everyone else Nazis. We should know what side he'd be on during the socialist revolution. Exactly, David. You're exactly right. Exactly right. Let's continue this.
It's a little thing, but the plight of the worker is universal to Americans, and he just happened to choose like very quintessentially red states. It's just a little interesting,
Yeah, he doesn't care about people in red states, right? That's what his basic position is. People in red states are all evil Trumpers. They all just need to die. And anyone who wants to organize them into unions and anyone who wants to bring socialism to them just needs to be wiped out because anyone who sympathizes with them is somehow a Nazi. That's his message, right? So yeah, it's a huge crime in his mind that I would dare want life to get better for low-income people in Illinois and Indiana and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Texas and Minnesota and Arkansas and Oklahoma, right? I mean, wow. This is getting serious,
Why am I lagging? Stop lagging.
Bob Dylan, he has that song All Along the Watchtowers. There's a line in the song
where he says, ruin that
Let us
song.
not speak falsely now. The hour is getting late. I don't like Bob Dylan, but I think that speaks to the moment we're in. We are headed for a real crisis.
Why doesn't he like Bob Dylan? I want to know.
And waving airsoft guns on the internet is over. The time for burning American flags is over. The time for advocating violence is over. The time for not being serious, the time for LARPing and acting like a child on the internet is over. We need to get out of the movement to the masses. We need the working people of the United States to understand that they are under attack and are ready to fight. We need to get them to understand that only socialism can save America.
Wait, they're under attack, they need to fight, but stop LARPing and advocating for violence? Wait, what? Wait, are we advocating for violence or not? By the way, Jason...
It's like, has it ever occurred to him that there's ways people can politically struggle that don't involve violence? Like, has he ever heard of the labor movement? Has he ever heard of sit-down strikes? Has he ever heard of the unemployment councils? Has he ever heard of socialist organizing? It's like he thinks me saying it's time for working people to organize and fight. He's like, he can't comprehend. It's like he's never studied the history of the socialist movement to envision any type of mass organizing that isn't left adventurous terrorism. Seriously? Like, I mean, seriously, this guy, I mean, Martin Luther King Jr., civil disobedience. I mean, seriously, this guy, he cannot comprehend that there might be ways people can assert their rights in the class struggle and organize and resist the power of big capital without engaging in left adventurous violence. Well, if that's the case, he's really not the person we should be rallying behind if we actually want to change things.
Jason Unruh wasn't even advocating for violence. Jason Unruh was just pointing out the objectively true, correct fact that revolutionary movements in the past have only used diplomacy as like a rhetorical tool and not as a serious effort at resolving their problems, because...
And that's actually false, which in the debate with Jason, I talked about that. No, I'll look at that. Thanks, Nate. Thanks, Christian. But yeah, there's a super chat up here rolling up. Right. All right. Operable. All righty. But there we go. But yeah, it's like, wow. I mean, he cannot understand any form of mass struggle other than left adventurous violence. So yeah. All right. Let's keep going, Bosch.
Their goals would never be accepted by the majority government. Unruh didn't even advocate for violence. He only pointed out the fact that revolutionaries, like you, if you're like a group of like 2,000 revolutionaries and you like write to Washington and you're like, hey, listen, we're going to bomb your capital, but if you're willing to give all power in the U.S. to us, we won't do it. I hope
That's
that
not
you
what happened.
understand the importance of...
And that's not what happened. The Chinese were in the KMT government. They advocated reforms through it. They tried to take power peacefully, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's like anyone who knows anything about the history of Marxism knows that the communists genuinely tried to peacefully take power when that was made impossible. And they were forced to defend themselves. That's how violence happened. That they didn't just write a letter to the KMT and say, we're going to bomb you unless you do this. They actually were in the KMT government. Mao was an alternate member of the Central Committee of the KMT national government at one point. I mean, what an idiot.
Resolving this in a diplomatic fashion. And like Washington's like, no. And then you're like, oh, okay. And you do the bombing. Like that's
okay. Not what happened. That's not what actually happened. That didn't happen in Venezuela. That's not how the Bolivarians took power. That's not how the Soviets were created in Russia. The Bolsheviks were part of the provisional government. And
doing violence there.
Only socialism can make their lives better. Only socialism can make a better country. And that by aligning with the people of the world and by fighting for a whole new America.
Wait, is Bob Dylan Jewish?
Values,
oh, shit.
Tearing down racism and colonialism, tearing down the prison industrial complex, getting rid of the Pentagon, rebuilding this country on new values, on new...
I'm being very uncharitable right now, but to be fair, Maupin does make it easy, doesn't he?
Foundation that by doing that.
So literally, he just said, and that's the last we're going to show of that. He just decided that the only reason I quoted a lyric by Bob Dylan, but said I didn't like Bob Dylan, is because I hate Jews. And I'm just seething at the mouth with hatred for Jews. Have you ever noticed how fixated he is on this Nazi thing? Everyone's a Nazi. Everyone who disagrees with him is a Nazi. Everything is code for Jew. And have you noticed that he basically just goes around defending the American status quo and accusing everyone of being anti-Semitic? Well, folks, there's a name for this, okay? And, get mad all you want and cancel me again. I've been canceled 100 times. This is called liberal Zionism. And now I know Vosh tweeted out that he wants to destroy Israel or something like that. Doesn't matter, right? Right-wing Zionism is straight up racism. Right-wing Zionists, supporters of Netanyahu, they go around, they think Arabs are an inferior race. They want to kill all the Palestinians. They hate Muslims. But liberal Zionism, which used to be much more prevalent. Liberal Zionism is this victim complex, right? Where the whole world is out to kill Jews, where every political conversation somehow revolves around Judaism. I was told this by a coworker who was a liberal Zionist once. He said that every religion other than Judaism was just something invented to justify killing Jews. It's this mindset where everything is about Judaism. Every alternative viewpoint to your own is somehow anti-Semitic. And that's where Vosh lives, right? The only reason I could possibly not like Bob Dylan is because I want to kill all Jews and I'm actually a Nazi. The only reason I could disagree with him about Iran or Russia, the only reason I could do anything is because I'm a Nazi, right? He lives in this alternative universe called liberal Zionism, and he can criticize Israel all he wants, but in his mind, the world revolves around Israel and Judaism. Anyone who disagrees with him is a Nazi, and that's all there is to the world. And that is a really dangerous mentality. If I walked around the world and said that everything revolved around white Christians like myself, and if people disagreed with me, I said, you must be part of the anti-white Christian conspiracy. You know what that would make me? That would make me a white supremacist. That would make me, basically pushing the Great Replacement, right? The Great Replacement is talking about, the opioid epidemic and all these things and saying it's a conspiracy to wipe out white people. Well, that's white supremacism because it's not a conspiracy to wipe out white people. It's the breakdown of capitalism, right? But, if you have a view that is centered around your ethnic group and views everything in the lens of my ethnic group versus your ethnic group, that is a racist view, right? I mean, and he's got the liberal Zionist perspective. Everything is a big conspiracy against the Jews. Everything's a big conspiracy against the Jews. Anyone who disagrees with him secretly wants to murder all Jews. Communism, like he said, the Soviet Union was fascist. The communists, even though they rescued millions of Jews from the concentration camps, even though they tore down the walls of Auschwitz, even though they took Berlin, even though they led a global anti-fascist front, no, they were just the same as the Nazis. They all just want to kill Jews. Rich is code for Jew. Banker is code for Jew. He has a racial supremacist, ethnic supremacist worldview. I mean, that's what it is. It's all just about Judaism with him. Everyone's a Nazi.
Everyone's a Nazi. Everyone who disagrees with him is a Nazi. It's all about Nazis. And what is the logical conclusion of that? Right? He might say he's against Israel. But if all of humanity that isn't Jewish is all involved in this vast conspiracy to kill the Jews, well, you clearly have to set up Israel to keep them safe. This is liberal Zionism. And Vosh can say he doesn't agree with Israel and he can claim he supports Palestinians. But what he's preaching here is not Marxism, it's liberal Zionism, right? That's what he thinks. It is just plain liberal Zionism. And I am going to call it what it is. And I'm sure he's going to call me anti-Semitic for that. But I'm already anti-Semitic. I said bankers. I'm already anti-Semitic. I didn't like Bob Dylan. That's how this worldview promotes itself. Right-wing Zionists, Netanyahu, it's just straight up white supremacism. But with Vosh, it's this distorted ethnocentric worldview where everything is about Jews and anyone who disagrees with them is involved in this big plot against the Jews. And this is a form of ethnopolitics and racism that is very widespread in the United States, right? And a lot of Christians buy into this, mind you. A lot of right-wing Christians really believe this. I was sitting in a pew in a church on Sunday at a right-wing church, and he was saying, oh, whenever they burn the American flag, they also burn the Israeli flag. Oh, there's a big conspiracy against Israel. This is what Zionism promotes. The Zionist worldview, in their mind, anyone who disagrees is a Nazi. Any criticism of Israel is coded anti-Semitism. Any mass populist movement where, people are getting together and fighting for their rights is going to lead to a new Holocaust. This is a dangerous ethnic worldview, and it's liberal Zionism, and you have to call it what it is. Vosh does not actually oppose capitalism. He thinks opposing capitalism means you just want every business to be a worker cooperative. And he thinks anyone who talks against bankers or against the military-industrial complex, that they're all secretly Nazis. He thinks that the global communist movement that built huge global anti-fascist fronts and actually defeated the Nazis is anti-Semitic. I mean, he is a liberal Zionist, and that is really what he believes, right? That is what he believes. Kyle Jones says Vosh and Barry Weiss would get along. And this is the liberal Zionist worldview. And we need to call out the liberal Zionist worldview because this is toxic. It's toxic. It is a toxic worldview that basically, it's actually, what it's a lot like? Vosh's worldview is a lot like anti-Semitism. It's actually a lot like the very thing he's ranting against. Because what do anti-Semites believe? Anti-Semites believe the problem isn't capitalism, that Western civilization is great, that, the traditional family structures are great, that, capitalism is great. The problem is just the Jews. That's what anti-Semites believe, right? That's what they believe, right? That the problem is just this group of people they don't have good Christian morals or they're whatever, right? That's what they believe, right? That's what anti-Semites believe. And they believe that everything would be fine in the West as long as we just got rid of this ethnic and religious group. That's what anti-Semites believe. That's what Vosh believes. He thinks Western capitalism is fine. He thinks U.S. imperialism is fine. He thinks the United States is fine. There's just this group of people called right-wingers who we need to remove. He wants to outlaw the Republican Party. He wants to dismantle the GOP, he said. And he just wants a big purge of Western civilization. And then everything's fine. Right? That's what he believes. And he believes anyone who actually wants to criticize capitalism is part of this secret Nazi cabal that he's fighting against. Vosh is basically a reverse anti-Semite. In his mind, it's just a big struggle. It's just a big struggle between friends of Israel and enemies of Israel. And anyone who disagrees with him on anything is part of some secret diabolical Nazi conspiracy. And if we just purge all of us, if they just ban us all from YouTube, if they all just put us all in jail for promoting conspiracy theories, then everything will be great because the war in Ukraine and sending weapons to the Azov battalion is good, and Iran deserves to suffer, and the Russian-speaking peoples in eastern Ukraine deserve to die and suffer, and any criticism of Big Pharma is just an evil conspiracy theory. That's what these folks believe. Liberal Zionism is basically reverse anti-Semitism, right? Just like anti-Semites have no problem with Western civilization, no problem with capitalism, no problem with imperialism. They just have this fixation on an ethnic group. That's what Vosh thinks. That is exactly what Vosh thinks, right? He just has this ethno-nationalist worldview where, you know, it's about the Jews versus the enemies of the Jews, and anyone who disagrees is secretly part of the diabolical conspiracy of enemies of the Jews. I mean, this isn't Marxism, folks. This is a weird ethno-nationalist form of politics. It's liberal Zionism. And that's what he's espousing, right? And I mean, that's what it is, you know. And again, cancel me for saying it, but I mean, they've already canceled me, folks. I mean, again, anyone who's critical of the vaccines is part of this secret Nazi conspiracy. Anyone who's critical of U.S. support for the Azov battalion Nazis in Ukraine is part of the secret Nazi conspiracy. Anyone who disagrees about anything is part of some secret diabolical, plot. Rich's code for Jew, bankers code for Jew. The Soviet Union is somehow Nazi, even though they defeated the Nazis. Everyone's a Nazi. It's all just about this purging America of this secret Nazi conspiracy. I talked about this in my BreadTube book because this is liberal Zionism, and it's dangerous, and it ain't Marxism. And we need to oppose it because, folks, the world is not controlled by any race. Races don't rule the world. The issue is not race. There are working class Jews. There are middle class Jews. There are wealthy Jews. There are Jews of many different income levels and many different class positions. There are wealthy WASPs. There are wealthy African Americans. There are wealthy Asians. The problem is capitalism and the economic foundations of society, not some race, not some ethnic group, not some religion, okay? There's a reason that scientific Marxists called anti-Semitism socialism for fools. Vosh is a fool. Vosh is a fool. In his mind, the problem isn't capitalism. It's just a vast conspiracy against the Jews. I mean, and then a lot of the people he thinks are part of this vast conspiracy against the Jews are right-wing Zionists who are themselves Jewish, right? And in fact, a big part of the far right wing that Vosh is always ranting against, a big part of the Trump supporters were Netanyahu people. So, it's like, even though somehow all right-wingers are part of a vast conspiracy against the Jews, right-wing Zionism is part of it. His worldview doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't even make any sense. Right? I mean, you get the idea that Vosh has been traumatized, right? That he's probably been told horror stories from his relatives about the evil things that were done to Jewish people in Eastern Europe, right? And I mean, it's true. I mean, he's from, I think, Koczynski. His last name is like a Polish last name. So it's probably a fact that his family endured pogroms and brutal anti-Semitic crimes, and fled to the United States. And so he's probably just grown up his whole life being told that there is this vast global plot against the Jews. And so he can't comprehend Marxism. He has to just center his worldview against this, that everything is that. And anyone who sounds like a dissident is secretly a Nazi. Vosh, everyone who disagrees with the mainstream in America is not a Nazi. Did you know that? Not everyone who disagrees with you is a Nazi. Right? Not everyone who disagrees with you is a Nazi. Many people don't like bankers, and they don't mean banker is code for Jew. I'm sorry. I mean, it's like the reality this guy lives in. He lives in this distorted reality, and we need to call it out for what it is. There you go. Vosh, BreadTubes, and the Democratic Party. It's difficult to get a man to understand something his salary depends on. Exactly. I mean, this is paid work at this point. I mean, it's pretty clear. But I mean, this worldview that he has, I mean, look, there are many anti-Zionist Jews out there. Are they part of the secret Nazi conspiracy, Vosh? What about all the communists, of Jewish heritage who fought for Stalin and fought for the Soviet Union and defeated fascism? Are they part of the secret Nazi conspiracy against the Jews, Vosh? This is nuts, right? I mean, and it's so blatantly this ethnic thing he's got going on. I mean, could you imagine someone who's Polish gets on here and talks about a world conspiracy against the Poles, and everyone who disagrees is secretly an enemy of the Poles? It's a nutty worldview. It's a nutty worldview, and it's based on real trauma. And I want to be sensitive to that. I don't want to downplay things like the Holocaust, horrendous events, or things like the pogroms. I don't want to be insensitive to that. I don't want to downplay what his family probably suffered during the pogroms of Eastern Europe. And I don't want to pretend that horror of what went on and how the Jewish community was kept in ghettos and segregated. And I don't want to downplay that at all. But I'm sorry, Vosh, but in the real world, everyone who's critical of the bankers is not an anti-Semite. And the people who are pretty clear about it. And they're pretty goddamn anti-Semitic too. And they're pretty goddamn anti-communist. I mean, you read any anti-Semitic tract, the main argument that they make in their anti-Semitic tracts is that they believe communism is an evil Jewish conspiracy. Well, communism is the hope and the future of the proletariat. You know, communism is a good thing, and it brings working people together of all different nationalities to struggle for justice. Communism is great, and you know, it's not a secret that when the World Zionist Organization was being formed, that their main target was Marxists, because they thought Marxism might lead to working people of different nationalities coming together, and that would destroy the potential of creating Israel, right? You know, that Zionists were very opposed to the Marxists because Marxism was seen as bringing people of different ethnicities, nationalities, and religious backgrounds together in class struggle. So yes, you know, anti-Semitism is socialism for fools, and Vosch's reverse anti-Semitism, where reality is defined by a secret Nazi conspiracy and everybody, a secret Nazi conspiracy that's taken over the government and needs to be purged. That's also socialism for fools. Socialism is an ideology of class struggle, of the proletariat, the workers struggling to seize control of the banks, factories, and industries, to organize the economy to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. That's what it is. All right. And I'm going to end my opening remarks now. We've gone on quite some time, but it needed to be done. Yeah. All right, folks. I know there's a couple more super chats I need to get out of my email, but let's do the names and locations. We'll start answering these super chats. It's hot. It's hot where I'm at. I'll tell you that much. I'm not in a part of the house where the air conditioning is, and it's hot. All righty. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Okay. Cognitive dissonance. Conspiracy. Dangerous hate and misinfo in video games. All right. Names and locations. Who we got here? All right. We got Black Cat Master in Oklahoma. We got Western Massachusetts, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. We got Auckland, New Zealand. Mosin from Iran. Lockport, New York. Southeast Missouri, Tyler McConnell. Shout out to you, Tyler. Herb Bryant in Tampa, Florida. Breadtube Infested USA, Felonious Punk. Southeast Missouri. Oh, we already did that one. Kieran from San Diego. Texas. Establishment Disliker in Texas. Christian in Bergen County. Coming to Chicago August 5th. I can't wait to see you there. Steve and Ann Ringgold in Georgia, Escondia in California, Upper Peninsula, Pennsylvania, Jeff in Delaware, Mindanao to Midwest, Lumpia Logic, shout out to you, Bob Troy in New York, Rob from Orlando, Zach in Westchester, Cedar Park, Texas, Jordan in Chicago, Nidden in Baltimore, Rob in Orlando, Zach in Westchester, right? Bendigo, Australia, David Fox, Kakalaki, that means North or South Carolina, it's slang. Oregon, Dr. Waldorf, New Mexico, Fiery Talk, says Antonio. Thank you. Very welcome. Right. Micah in Las Vegas. Welcome. Toronto, Canada. Beirut, Lebanon. Very, very good. Very good. Northern Lower Michigan. Hi. Kim Young, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Taiwan, China, California, Spain. Very, very good. Charlotte, shout out to Char Darling. Charlotte in Nassau County. San Diego, very good. California, very, very good. Union County, Yada Yisrael in Chicago. Nathaniel from Washington, very, very good. Alexis from Sacramento. Union County, New Jersey, very, very good. Very, very good. Matt from Maryland. Chicago, very, very good. Very, very good. St. Louis. Matt in Maryland. Mel from Australia. Bradley Wasser in St. Louis. All right, folks. Okay. All righty. All right.
was Black Lives Matter hijacked in order to topple Donald Trump? Well, let me tell you something. I went to Ferguson, Missouri. Oh, what's this? I haven't followed that, Sean. I went to Ferguson, Missouri in 2014 to cover the uprising that was happening there. And the politics that I saw on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri were Black nationalist politics. They were the politics of the Nation of Islam. They were the politics of the new Black Panther Party, Pan-Africanism. But Black Lives Matter started kind of in the aftermath. I guess you could say Black Lives Matter first got tweeted out when Trayvon Martin's case was going on. I think that's when it started to become a prominent hashtag. But then, in the aftermath of the Ferguson uprising in Ferguson, Missouri, near St. Louis, which I went to and covered, I even made a documentary about it. You started to see Black Lives Matter, BLM, be a thing. And BLM had much more liberal politics, and the leadership of BLM were much more middle class. And BLM, I mean, look, the conditions are real. I mean, there have been rebellions against police brutality in the Black community in the United States for decades and decades and decades. The Black community has been plagued by police brutality. The courts give the police a free hand to murder African Americans, and it goes on and on and on and over and over and over in so many cases that you can talk about where the police get away with murdering an African American man. Obama was president, and there was a feeling that now this issue might be addressed. And under Obama, things got worse. Conditions got worse, and that's why you started to see rebellions. But a lot of it also had to do with unemployment. You have a lot of young Black people that are unemployed. They're unemployed, and they're facing police brutality. And like when I was out in Ferguson, the way things were set up, it was like speed traps all through. And every one of these little municipalities was trying to target the same group of people for tickets. The police presence against these low-income Black folks was just constantly trying to see how to get them to pay tickets, speed traps and checkpoints. And it was just vicious. And you get an explosion. And you combine that with economic conditions. And, we talk about the low-wage police state. And the low-wage police state has been hitting the Black community much longer than it's been hitting, the white community. The Black community, they were always the last hired and the first fired. The economic conditions are worse. The police state repression has always been worse. And with Obama in office and things not getting better, the rise in unemployment, you had an explosion. And that happened. And that wasn't a conspiracy by anybody. That was a real righteous anger against the rising police state and worsening conditions. Now, were there forces that then said, okay, we're going to use this to our political advantage? Sure. And in addition to that, when the pandemic happened, was there a feeling that amid Trump being president, someone who the Black community is not particularly fond of, and other issues, was it possible that all these people unemployed, it could go out and turn into something really big? Was there a fear? Sure. And did we see people like Mitt Romney and others who generally have been hostile to such protest movements and joining it? Sure. So these kind of things are complicated. And this is what Lenin writes about in his book, What Is to Be Done? He is trying to confuse people. But this is what Lenin writes about in What Is to Be Done, about spontaneous movements, right? Spontaneous movements, how a spontaneous uprising of the people, if revolutionaries don't intervene, it just becomes something serving the status quo. And that's what happened. Black Lives Matter was this widespread uprising of the African American community, but it was George Soros and the liberal NGOs and the Democratic Party that ultimately hijacked it and gave political direction to it. And largely the identity politics and the liberalism that dominates BLM circles today, that wasn't there at the beginning. It was Black nationalist sentiments that are very widespread in the Black community that were kind of the beginning of Black Lives Matter. But then it got kind of hijacked and turned into a liberal ID poll thing. But that doesn't mean the conditions that people were rebelling against. Look, if there's a working class movement that gets channeled into supporting the Democratic Party, that doesn't mean the conditions the working class are facing are not real, right? Just because a movement gets hijacked by one wing of the power structure doesn't mean it's not objecting to real conditions that are objectively real. And that's one thing that the right wing, when they try to deny what Black people have suffered in the United States, they're delusional. And they're dangerously delusional. It's willful ignorance. You can't deny what Black people have endured. You can't deny it. right? Just like you can't deny the Holocaust and what Jewish people have endured, just like you can't deny the oppression of LGBT folks and the suffering that LGBT, you can't deny people's suffering. Just because there are not good political forces that are banking off of people's suffering, right? And that happens. You can't deny the suffering that exists, right? Women, domestic violence, rape, sexual assault, these things are real. And just because we might not be a fan of what some feminist group is saying, that doesn't mean these things are not real. And that's the danger. And that's how, political opportunists are able to mobilize, right? Either you agree with them, right? You agree with them, or you're denying the oppression. And so then all they have to do is go to a woman who suffered and said, well, these people who disagree with me, they're saying you're not suffering. That's a way to shut them up, right? And then these people that are disagreeing with me, they're saying racism isn't real. Well, clearly racism is. And that's the game these people play, right? So it's really important to not fall into the trap. Never want to poo-poo people's suffering, right? Different groups have suffered horrendously, but the root of their suffering is capitalism. The root of their suffering is class society and hierarchies and scarcity, which is rooted in the economic foundations of society. It's rooted in capitalism. And this is something Bosch claims I never say. I say it over and over and over again. The reason that the Nazis fomented anti-Semitism was because they didn't want there to be a socialist movement that would overthrow capitalism. The reason that racism has been such a big factor in U.S. history is because it was a way to divide the working class, to oppress the black people, right? And this was always the communist understanding, that the reason that we have a society where people's rights are not recognized, the reason we have patriarchy and the oppression of women, all of this is rooted in the economic foundations of the capitalist system. And that by mobilizing working people of different backgrounds to see what they have in common and to resist the power structure and make demands on the power structure, by doing that, we are pushing forward a movement that can uproot these forms of injustice. And that's why communists have historically been the biggest fighters for black freedom and for women's rights. That's why the founder of the LGBT movement was Harry Hay, a member of the Communist Party. That's why Leslie Feinberg, who I knew and worked with, she might not agree with a lot of things I say now, and that's okay. She doesn't have to, and she's long deceased, but Leslie Feinberg, that's why she was the first openly trans activist, right? It tends to be communists that are on the vanguard of struggling against all form of oppression, because they have a scientific understanding of where this oppression comes from. Not an ID poll understanding, not an emotional one, but rather one rooted in Marxism, Leninism, and dialectical and historical materialism. But there you go. All right. Real Nazism has never been tried. I think it has. Nazi Germany was a pretty big display of Nazism. But it's worth pointing out that fascism often comes in a variety of forms. Mussolini's fascism was very different than Nazi fascism. Nazi fascism was racial, fixated on anti-Semitism, had a big racial and ethnic component, glorified Middle Ages. Mussolini's fascism had a lot of futuristic vibes, didn't focus on the ethnic stuff as much. The fascism of Franco in Spain started out as quote unquote national syndicalism. They're talking about worker cooperatives. You can talk about Pinochet fascism and, what Pinochet did and how it was a mobilization for degrowth to destroy society. But, what Pinochet did, it didn't espouse the same kind of imagery that we see. There are different fascist movements historically. What makes it fascism is not what you say, it's what you do. That's a really important point. What makes it fascism is not what you say, it's what you do. No matter what fascists believe, they always do the same thing, which is they seize control of society, they take control of the government, and they smash opposition and resistance. They build an authoritarian state to serve one section of the ruling class, and then they mobilize society for degrowth, for driving down living standards. So there you go. Yeah. Fascists are fascists because of what they do, not because of what they say. The Ku Klux Klan sounded very different than the black shirts, the black hundreds in Russia, the black shirts of Italy. The Ku Klux Klan sounded very different than the Nazis of Germany, but they all essentially had the same program, which is, seize control of the government and use the government to engage in heavy repression to stabilize capitalism, drive down living standards. That's what fascism is all about. Communist Party of Ukraine is banned. Well, it's been banned many times, right? I mean, they banned it in 2014, and then they had some court rulings, and then they banned all opposition parties. But I think there was just recently a court ruling that outlawed it again, that like solidified the outlawing of the Communist Party of Ukraine. It's in the eastern regions of Ukraine that there was a lot of people who voted for the Communist Party, and the Donetsk People's Republic, the Lugansk People's Republic. There's a lot of members of the Communist Party over there. Right. And that's why it's shocking to see so many people on the left buy into this anti-Russian stuff, because in Russia, the Russian Communist Party are big supporters of Russia's defense of the people of the eastern regions. Big supporters of them. Leftists attacking Thomas Paine for being white. Well, nobody, among the so-called founding fathers of the United States, Thomas Paine, I don't think he signed the Declaration of Independence, but he was, the author of Common Sense, which was the manifesto, the ideological agitational pamphlet of the American Revolution. He was one of the main writers and thinkers of the American Revolution. He was opposed to slavery. He supported the Haitian Revolution. So there you go. All right. So yeah, Thomas Paine was, among the founding fathers. He was one of the most anti-racist and one of the most progressive. He advocated a guaranteed minimum income. So there you go. Would a populist third party be possible? Break out of the red and blue team. Well, yes, but if such a populist third party were to emerge, there would probably, in order for it to really be effective, my thinking was that it would need to have, members of the major party who split with it. The Republican Party started out as a third party, split from the Whig Party, but a big chunk of the Whig Party went over to them. So that's an important thing to note. But yeah, look, I am for third parties. I'm for challenging vote blue, never who. I'm for breaking out of this dichotomy. I'm for it. And if Jimmy Dore runs for president, I think that would be awesome. Nick Brana of the People's Party is a friend of mine. He's awesome. He does great work. I am very supportive of third parties. I voted for third parties many times in my life. So there you go. All righty. Very good. All right, the Duran. What are my thoughts? What's a great anti-imperialist website? The Duran does a lot of work exposing the lies against Russia and U.S. media. It's coming from a more conservative kind of place, a more traditional and conservative kind of place. So that's not my ideology, but I'm at the point where, again, I'm interested in challenging the powers that be, not sitting around and having an ideological wank. And there's a lot of people who claim to be socialists or leftists who are very, very hostile to me. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of confused ideas, but are actually standing up to the ruling elites and challenging the imperialists in their wars and their lies. And I'm more interested in what you do in the real world at this point than ideology. I will push my ideology. I do believe in Marxism. I publish Marxist books. I come at things from a Marxist perspective, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about Marxism. But that said, whether or not you vaguely say you're a socialist or vaguely say you're a Marxist is not the cutting edge in this time. And that needs to be understood, right? Look, the British Labour Party that supported the U.S. invasion of Iraq is supposed to be a socialist party, right? But does that matter? No. The Islamic Republic of Iran hates Marxism. But does that matter? No, they're anti-imperialists. And that socialism is about a struggle between the oppressed and the oppressors, between imperialism and anti-imperialism, between the workers and the capitalists. That's what Marxism is about. So as a Marxist, you position yourself on those sides of the struggles. You don't just blindly agree with anyone who happens to vaguely say they agree with you. It's about where the powers that be align and where the forces of resistance are. And so that's why I like the Duran. All right. Marxist view of the French Revolution. Well, it's interesting. I can't, when I talk about like the French Revolution, like there's no book by a Marxist that immediately comes to mind as like, oh, this is what you must read. But like the French Revolution was the point of reference for almost everything that Karl Marx wrote. Like one of Marx's best pamphlets, the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. What's a Brumaire? It's a month of the French revolutionary calendar. And the 18th Brumaire refers to a date in which there was a coup that was seen as decisive and kind of ending the French Revolution. It was like, so, Trotsky in his writings, he's constantly referencing the Thermidor, or the Thermidorian reaction. Well, that refers to a point in the French Revolution where the reign of terror was coming to an end, right? that the concept, the word terror and terrorism that comes from the French Revolution, that there was after the revolution, they had the terror where they were executing people from the old system. There's a lot of violence in the aftermath, the excesses of the French Revolution. Lenin's critics called him Robespierre, in reference to a leader of the French Revolution. And that the French Revolution is constantly a point of reference in any Marxist text, especially stuff from Marx himself, but Trotsky, Lenin, they're constantly referencing the French Revolution. And if you want to, just kind of understand the French Revolution in kind of a scientific way, there's one book I would recommend. It's written by some American academic, but it has a lot of good insights. It's called The Anatomy of a Revolution. The Anatomy of a Revolution. It's from the 1930s. It was written by an academic in the United States. But he talks about patterns in revolutions throughout history. He talks about the lead up to the revolution, divisions in the ruling class. He talks about the Bonapartism, Thermidor. He talks about the terror. He talks about the new order consolidating itself. And so I would read The Anatomy of a Revolution. That's a really good text if you want insights from a Marxist analytical perspective about the French Revolution, what we can draw from it. I would recommend The Anatomy of a Revolution. All right. Is the 1939 pact comparable to the North Korea, the DPRK's 38th parallel? In a way, right? It's an agreement that here's a line and neither of our armies will cross either side. So I guess you could make that analogy, right? I mean, that's what the 1939 pact, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was. It was a line through Europe. Neither of our armies will cross either side. Can someone repeat? I guess there was a second part to Lumpia's question. Can someone repeat it in the chat so I can see it? I'm sorry, writing down the chats and everything. If someone could repeat Lumpia's second question, I want to answer Lumpia's question. So I want to make sure she gets the answer. So if someone can repeat it, that would be awesome. I guess it's comparable in the fact that it's a line that no one can cross. I mean, it's comparable in that way. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union had not yet gone to war. I mean, the 38th parallel agreement that was, the armistice signed at the end of the Korean War, that was after a huge devastating war. And there was supposed to be a peace treaty afterwards and it never happened. But so it's a little bit different, but I guess in the sense of here's a line and neither of us cross it, that's fair. All right. All righty. Okay. Can someone repeat, how do we counteract calling Biden's Dems and Germany's Greens and the World Economic Forum as communists and socialism, conflating imperialism with communism? That's a very good point. How do we do that, right? Well, we point out that communism has historically been a movement of the workers against imperialism, and that, that none of those, the World Economic Forum believes in capitalism, and it's huge, wealthy corporations that are making super profits and dominating the planet. You ultimately have to talk about Lenin and imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, and the trusts, cartels, and syndicates that dominate the world. And you have to talk about the people they're fighting against, right? And the people that oppose them: China, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran. Those are revolutionary anti-capitalist forces. Most of them adhere to some form of Marxism. And you have to talk about imperialism and you have to talk about anti-imperialism if you want to break that down for people, right? And that, there's a great call years ago. Someone called into Alex Jones. And they're like, you're always talking about how these wars are being waged, how they lie, but the people they're attacking are always socialists and leftists. And Alex Jones just had a meltdown, yelling, no, you want bigger government, But it's true. They don't attack the countries that have free market libertarian economies. The countries that have free market libertarian economies are where Wall Street sets up shop, right? The countries they attack are countries that are building, controlled state-centered economies, raising their people up out of poverty, usually with socialism, whether it's Ba'athist Arab socialism in Iraq or it's in Syria, or it's, Islamic socialism in Libya, or it's straight up Marxism like in China and Cuba. Whether it's Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union, taking control of its resources and becoming a competitor with the West again, whether it's Cuba with the Communist Party in power, they tend to target countries that are controlling their economy and using it to raise people up out of poverty. And they tend to, when they take over countries, impose free market reforms on them, right? I don't see any country in the world that's like privatizing everything and getting the government out of the economy. And the USA says, they can't do that. We're going to invade. Never happens. Never happens. That's in fact what they impose. That's what the IMF and the World Bank impose. When they go into these countries, they impose Milton Friedman economics. They impose Alan Greenspan economics. They impose Ayn Rand economics. They impose Jeffrey Sachs. They impose Adam Smith. That's what they do. They tend to impose libertarianism and free markets around the world. And the countries that they resist, whether they may not all be explicitly Marxist, but they all have some kind of socialistic control of their economies, and they're using that to raise their people up, and that's why they get targeted. So I think that's what we need to understand, that neoliberalism is about going around the world and imposing free markets and free market economics at the point of a gun. And that's what they did in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. That's what they did in Latin America in the 90s. And that's what they've been doing everywhere. I mean, that's what they do. They impose free markets, and the forces of resistance tend to be socialistic. All righty. Next question. How do we deal with the cognitive dissonance around people who just say it's a conspiracy theory? Well, sometimes you just have to break it down to people and say, look, there's a trick that they're doing, which is the light switch effect, where they say, oh, you don't agree with the mainstream? You must believe in lizard people. You must believe in the Illuminati. You must be a Holocaust denier. You must be in La La Land. And you have to say to people, look, don't fall for that. Talk about the Kennedy assassination and say, look, it's pretty clear that, Oswald didn't act alone. And a lot of people think that, a lot of people that are very respectable. And show them that a lot of things that are considered conspiracy theories in the United States are believed around the world, that there's a pretty strong argument to be made in some of these cases, that there's more to it than the official story. You have to make that argument to people, and on top of that, you have to, after making that argument to people, you just have to say to them, look, don't fall for the light switch effect. And you have to also point out that the conspiratorial worldview, that it's all just the big diabolical plot by the thing up on the thing. That's not correct. Look, if there was some secret group of controllers that controlled everything, things would be working out a lot better than they are now. The problems of capitalism are based on the fact that there isn't some central, authority that plans out everything. When it really gets down to it, if you look at it, there isn't some big central authority that's planning everything. There's utter chaos because profits are in command. And so we don't have a conspiratorial worldview. There are groups of capitalists that fight against each other and conspire against each other. But there's not some grand thing up on the thing. There's no Illuminati controlling everything, because if they were, they'd be doing a better job. They don't control things. And they're like chickens running around with their heads cut off. So there you go. All right. Russia's younger generation seems liberal. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. Probably maybe social media has a lot to do with it, but I don't know if that's true right now. There's a lot of Russian young people that are patriotic. I have to argue with liberals on why Christian fascism is not a real threat to America. They don't take my word for it. What evidence to give them? Okay, we'll talk about that. All right. It was at one point. We'll talk about that. There's a lot to say there. All right. Dangerous and hateful ideas and misinformation in video games. I know nothing about that, my friend. I apologize. I do not play video games, so I cannot give a critique of dangerous misinformation and stuff in video games because I just don't play them. If I played them, I'd be full of great insights about that stuff, but I don't play video games. My parents didn't allow me to play video games. I got away with playing games on my computer. I played SimCity, so I guess that was on my computer, and my parents thought it was educational. That's how I got away with that. And when I would go visit my uncle, I used to play Doom on his computer, but other than that, in the video game world, I'm just not capable of commenting on it. And I have mixed feelings. I don't want to rag on anyone who plays video games. If video games bring you enjoyment, good for you. You know what I mean? Good for you. All right. Advice on writing a book. All right. Advice on writing a book. All right. Handwritten versus software. All right. Handwritten versus software. Drafts. All right. right. Very good. So I just can't comment on video games. And honestly, there are some people who play video games, and I think it's not very good for their mental health. But that doesn't apply to everyone. There's some people I know who play video games who seem perfectly happy. I tend to be critical of video games. And thank you, Tyler. And I will answer your question. But yeah, there you go. Oh, what do you think of Jeffrey Sachs' conclusion? Yeah. All right. All right. So the person was asking about Babeuf. That's an early not a Marxist, but an early socialist revolutionary who predates Marx, that Marx wrote a lot about. And I haven't studied him. I know he was a big influence on Marx, and he was one of these more utopian and revolutionary individuals that predates Marx, was a socialist, was opposed to capitalism, was probably more in the Marxist analysis of rock music. Analysis of rock music, was more of a utopian socialist and an armed radical, but he was kind of an influence on Marx. And I'm trying to recall about him. I haven't spent a long time studying him, but he was certainly an influence on Marx, and he was a pre-Marxist socialist. All right. Why Christian fascism is not a threat to America? Well, it was at one point. During the Bush years, there was a real, these mega churches that were aligned with the neocons. They were the bulk. They were the bulk of U.S. imperialism. I mean, they were the force that dominated the military, and they were supporting the invasions of Iraq, and they were hating Muslims and screaming against Muslims and calling Muslims evil, and they were, they were awful. Still today, I mean, look, a big chunk of the military, a big chunk of Israel supporters are, quote unquote, part of the Christian right wing. And so you could argue that there's still an ideological threat, but they don't have the power they once had. Thank you, Olympia. Thank you very much. They don't have the power that they once had. That's for sure. Their influence is waning. And I remember the new atheist movement was almost like a punch in the mouth to the evangelical Christian right. And it was because they did a lot of things that ultimately hurt the USA in the long run. The US imperialists need to align with Muslims in like Syria and Libya and the Middle East. They need to have Muslim allies like the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Christian right went out of their way to offend those folks. And Bush called the war against terrorism a crusade. And that really didn't play well in the Muslim world. And those Muslim folks, those evangelical Christian folks, they also, in a lot of ways, Europe laughs at them. I mean, they don't believe in evolution. They don't believe in Darwinian evolution. They think the world was created in 6 days. They reject modern science. And the amount of influence those people had in the military, it was causing a lot of problems for U.S. imperialism. So the new atheist movement of Richard Dawkins and others, they used the new technology, social media and such, and they gave those folks a punch in the mouth. And they still have a lot of power, but it's not what it once was. And that it's much more of a choice. Like when I was a kid, a lot of people were involved in right-wing Christian stuff. They were involved in it because everyone they knew was. Their family was involved in it. Now it's not like that. If you got a phone, you'll hear stuff that's critical. You'll hear views that are critical of those folks, and you'll not be part of it. You're an evangelical Christian now because you choose to be one. Not because your family is, not because you went to an evangelical Christian school, not because you're from a small town where everyone's an evangelical. You're an evangelical now because you choose to be one, because the alternative information is out there. The critique of biblical literalism is out there. Stuff is out there, and people have access to information. And the U.S. imperialists, I think, don't. They use those people as they have them on the back burner. They're useful. You still got Mike Pence, you still got Mike Pompeo, but ultimately the mainstream of U.S. imperialism sees those folks as kind of an embarrassment and kind of getting in the way. But they were, during the Bush years, they were the main solid core of U.S. society, and they were fanatical, and it's complicated. But ultimately, I would say at this point, they are not the main threat. They are a current among pro-U.S. imperialist currents. Thoughts on Marx's opiate of the people term? Okay. Marx's opiate of the people term. All righty. Okie dokie. All right. Okay. All right. we got a few more here. I'm going to try to give everyone a decent answer here, but I'm starting my strength. We've been going 2 hours and 18 minutes. My strength is starting to fade, but I'll keep going. I'll keep going for a little bit. All right. Next question is advice on writing a book. Do you do it handwritten or software? How do you do different drafts, etc.? Well, look, one thing for me is I've always been writing. I mean, since I was a kid, I've always been writing. Before I could even write, I would like dictate. My mother would be sitting there writing, and I'd be, writing a story about something. And, I grew up in a library. My mom's a librarian. I walked the picket lines with her in Stark County, Ohio, when she went on strike when I was a kid. I was like a fourth grader when that happened. Writing books have always been part of my life, books, writing, literacy. So what I generally do is I write an outline first, right? I write nonfiction. I don't write fiction because I don't read enough fiction to write fiction, right? Sometimes I get tempted to write fiction, but I realize I don't read fiction. In order to, I read a lot of nonfiction, so I write nonfiction. And I encourage people to live by that. If you want to write fiction, read a lot of fiction. If you want to write nonfiction, read nonfiction. The way I do my writing is I tend to map it out. I tend to make an outline, and then I'll start. I wait until I have a good idea of each chapter, right? Because if you just force yourself to write it, it'll come out, but it will come out kind of bland. You want to wait until you can kind of get excited about it, right? You want to, for every chapter, you want to have like a concept or something where you get passionate about it, where you can put your energy into it. So wait until the concept fully develops in your mind where you can get excited about it, and then sit down and write it. And do that for every chapter. Wait until you can snap it. Wait until you can get excited about every chapter. Wait until your passion comes for every chapter. Write it, and then read it again, and go over it again, and then 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 give it to a proofreader to go over it, and then give it to somebody else to go over it and make notes. And, you write and you rewrite and you rewrite and you rewrite. And it requires patience. And that's one thing. Sometimes I get so excited about what I'm writing that I don't do enough revision. Really, most of writing is revision. The overwhelming majority of writing is revision. You might spend a lot of time in your head getting everything as you want it, writing little outlines. I do that with a pen and paper usually. But then when I'm ready, I sit down and I type it, and I sit down and I type. I get everything, like a first draft of it, and then I do it again, and then I do it again and again. And honestly, the more you revise, the better your writing is. And when you're on a schedule, when you really need to churn stuff out, your ability to revise is limited. And that can be a problem, right? And especially if you're very passionate, you want to get stuff out there. It can be a problem that you don't go back and revise. But yeah, generally with nonfiction, you write an outline. You wait until you're excited about every chapter, until it shouldn't be a chore to write every chapter. There should be part of your soul in every chapter. You should have a passion in every chapter, and then just rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And that's generally how I do things. And it's a time-consuming process, and it's not an easy thing to do. Especially if you're like me, and it's like every day you're talking to somebody else on the phone, and you're running to this part of the country and running to another part of the country and giving a speech here and a YouTube stream here. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's something you got to do. So there you go. All right. What do you think of Jeffrey Sachs and his theory on the lab? Well, look, I have a couple thoughts. I talked about it on a stream earlier this week, like 2 or 3 days ago. I did a stream where I showed the clip of Jeffrey Sachs. Look, Jeffrey Sachs actually says a lot of really good stuff now. I mean, he was the economist of neoliberalism. He was Mr. Neoliberalism during the 1990s. I mean, he was the butcher of Bolivia. He was one of the main economic advisors to the Clintons, a friend of the Clinton family. But in more recent years, he's spoken positively of Nicaragua. He's defended Venezuela, criticized U.S. sanctions against Venezuela. And I think that he's old, and he's built a career. So now he can get away with being more honest, and that he studies raw economic data. And he's much more critical of neoliberalism, and he tends to be critical of U.S. foreign policy. And I know he's tied in with the Progressive International, with Yanis Varoufakis and Bernie Sanders and others. And he's one of the better voices in that crowd, I will say. So the fact that he came forward and said this, I appreciate it. And I'm surprised, but I'm not hugely surprised. He's the kind of person that if there was something like that, he would be the one to come out and say it. And he himself, he said he doesn't know for sure. So we don't want to make it sound like that's the smoking gun. It's like he doesn't know for sure. He believes that is what he said. And a lot of the evidence points to that. But he himself wasn't sure. What makes me angry is that now someone as credible and treated with credibility as the mainstream as Sachs is, has said something that you got canceled for saying. I mean, you got your Twitter taken down. There was an article on Global Research about this. The Center for Global Research in Canada published an article saying this, and the Chinese diplomat tweeted it out, and like the Trump government like called him to Washington and yelled at him about tweeting it out, right? And if you dared say anything about Fort Detrick or the possibility that COVID was originated in a U.S. lab, you got silenced. And now, we got a lot of mainstream voices saying, including Jeffrey Sachs, that it's actually quite credible. So that seems to indicate that this cancel culture is bullshit. And this, that's a conspiracy theory mantra, that's bullshit. That's what I take from that. All right. Marxist analysis of rock music. Oh boy. Well, where do we begin? I mean, music has always been around. The first instrument was the human voice, but humans have always been making music throughout history. Since the beginning of time, the ancient tribes had drums and, and the, trumpets and, instruments have been around. Music's been around for a long time. And, music is something that's really the product of, more abundance. And until you had a surplus, no one was talking about music. In hunter-gatherer societies, they might have had singing they did together to entertain themselves. But other than that, you didn't have it. It wasn't until you had societies with some level of abundance, where you had some kind of a leisure class, people with free time, that you got music. Fast forward, so where did rock and roll music come from? Well, there's a couple key influences on it, right? So the first influence is the blues, which is traditional African-American music, right? I mean, it's African-American music, right? African-Americans, you have African-American spirituals, you have the blues, which is kind of a tradition in the African-American community, singing about your problems. That's different. African-American spirituals are not rock music. Blues is not rock music. But then you have a particular phenomenon, which is Pentecostal music, right? I don't know if people know about this, but, Pentecostal Christianity or charismatic Christianity, it's a form of evangelical fundamentalist Christianity. It's different than other forms, right? You have Baptists, you have other folks, but in the U.S. South, you had Pentecostal Christians. And the music that Pentecostal Christians had at their prayer services was always different. It was very repetitive and very rhythmic, right? And the Pentecostal Christians would pray for many hours. And a lot of the traditions of Pentecostal Christians, right? They basically believe in inducing a trance state, right? Pentecostal Christians, it was like, the idea was to get God in the room with you. Like charismatic Christians, right? I believe it's somewhere in the Bible, it says your children will, you dream dreams and hear visions. The idea was that they're doing what on Pentecost, when Jesus, put flames upon all their heads and said, go make disciples of all nations. They're carrying that out. And Pentecostalism is charismatic Christianity, where they're trying to induce a religious experience with their prayer services. And so the music of Pentecostal Christians tends to be quite different, and a lot of people, Pentecostal prayer services started out among African slaves. And some of the traditions came from Africa. Some of them were brought over from the tribal, spiritual, religious ceremonies that Africans did, and it was combined with Christianity. And in the U.S. South, and it was interracial, you had white and black people who would go to these prayer services that were like 6-7 hours long, and it would be all day on Sunday, and they're dancing and they're moving, and people are getting into hypnotic states, and it's very repetitive. The song has like the same line over and over and over again, and the drums are playing, and it's very lively. And it's just kind of hours and hours and hours, right? So that is Pentecostal music. Again, not rock music, right? Rock and roll music, right? It's kind of a weird fusion of the blues, of African-American spirituals, of Pentecostal prayer music, all kind of mixed into something that was, look, Elvis. When Elvis Presley started, that was the blues, right? That song, You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog or whatever, that was by a black woman originally. All right, Gadsden Massacre. All right. It was by a black woman originally. It was a blues song, right? But Elvis kind of, made it his own. The version that Elvis, if you listen to the original version of Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog, it doesn't sound like Elvis sounded. Elvis changed it, right, to make it his own way, right? And, you started in the 1950s, you had this kind of lively music. And in a lot of cases, it was white guys, white men singing black music, right? And it was like it was segregation in the United States, and that black performers were not welcome in a lot of places. And there was a feeling that, it was lively music from the black community in incorporating various black traditions from the church, from the blues, from other places, but white people doing it. Buddy Holly, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis. These were white guys who played black music. And a lot of them there was kind of the Pentecostal church music background or something like that. It came out of the South. They tended to be from the South. So they were around black people. They were around the Pentecostal church and all of that. And then in a lot of ways, but it was about mass marketing. It was about making money, right? That lively music, it's very exciting, kind of gives you a high or whatever, is very profitable. People will go buy those records and spend a lot of money on it. So as a result of various trends existing in the culture, and as a result of, the post-World War II economic boom, people had a lot more money and a lot more free time. And as a result of that, you got record companies, and there was a lot of marketing research that was done, and people talk about, this is where people get all conspiratorial, and they talk about Tavistock, and they talk about William Sargent, who wrote The Mind Possessed and was going around studying religious ceremonies. And, for whatever reason, between psychological research and marketing research that was done, between African-American spiritual music, between, Pentecostal prayer, hypnotic, spiritual stuff, and the blues and other black traditions, it all kind of melded into what starting in like the mid 50s, we now call rock and roll. And it's funny. I have a brother who's a music historian, and he's probably, if he's watching this, which he won't be, he's probably fuming at the mouth. I mean, he's probably, because he understands the history of rock music far better than I do. I'm telling you what I have studied. And I mean, there's probably like all kinds of rock historians who know this way better than I do. But that's kind of the music that we now call rock and roll music. I believe that's where it came from. It's a product of, mass marketing, etc. All right. Next question. All right. Marx quote on the opiate of the people. Well, Marx was an atheist. He was very non-religious. He was opposed to religion and traditionalism, but it's important to note when that particular passage that Karl Marx wrote, where he refers to religion as the opiate of the people, is one of the places he's actually most sympathetic to religion. He says, religion is the heart of a heartless world. It is the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opiate of the people. That's what Karl Marx is saying in that particular passage. So it's important to note that while Marx is definitely not religious, definitely anti-religious, that particular quote is one of the most sympathetic things he ever said about religion. So there's that. And the Katyn massacre, go and read what other folks say. I don't know enough about it. I just don't, right? I know that there is the Nazis did plead guilty to it at the Nuremberg trials and were convicted. Like a lot of Nazis confessed to involvement. I know there's also, though, a feeling not just in Poland, but in Russia that no, the Soviets did it. And I don't know enough about it, right? I know Grover Furr has written extensively, and he maintains that Russia is not responsible for the Katyn massacre. But there are some other communists I know who think, no, Russia absolutely did it. I don't know enough about it. And at the end of the day, if Stalin did that, if indeed Stalin rounded up a bunch of Polish government officials in the lead up to World War II and shot them, and that's awful, and that's horrible, but that doesn't make the Soviets wrong in fighting the Nazis, right? I mean, Abraham Lincoln was a racist. He killed some Native Americans. There were some executions of Native Americans. That doesn't make the South right in World War II or in the Civil War, right? And is it possible that the Soviet Union did bad things? Yes. The world is a lot uglier than people think it is. It's like if you expect that every revolutionary movement that actually exists is going to be pure. It's very possible. I'm not ruling it out that some figures in the Soviet military did something awful, and that's bad. And if that's the case, if it happened the way they say it did, that's wrong, and I condemn it. But that doesn't mean the Soviet Union wasn't amazing in defeating the Nazis, raising millions of people out of poverty, inventing space travel. The Soviet Union shows us that socialism works as an economic system and that we don't have to have capitalism. And what they achieved in the short, after the Bolshevik Revolution, in the face of 15 countries invading, a blockade, the invasion by the Nazis, the fact that they raised so many people out of poverty, the fact that they invented space travel, the fact that they industrialized and wiped out illiteracy, and out of, after the Russian Revolution, Russia was just devastated. But out of that just utter devastation following World War I and the chaos of the Russian Revolution, out of that, you got a country that became a global superpower, that industrialized, that supported revolutionary movements all across the world, fighting for their freedom in the Arab world, in Asia, and Africa, and elsewhere, supported the Black freedom struggle. The fact that out of the conditions they were in 1917, you got a society that was capable of so many economic miracles, so many big achievements, technological achievements, humanitarian achievements. They electrified Egypt. They built the Aswan Dam. So many countries in the world benefited from trade with the Soviet Union. So many people fighting against colonialism and oppression aided from the Soviet Union. The fact that they accomplished all of that, despite what they were up against. If they indeed committed this massacre the way that their detractors say they did, which I'm not saying I'm 100% convinced. I haven't studied it. I know that there are people I respect that think they didn't do it, but then there are also people I respect that say that they absolutely did. That's not the issue, right? And I'm not here to tell you that Stalin never did anything wrong. I'm not here to tell you that the Soviet government never committed any atrocities, or that human rights violations didn't go on. And if I said all of those kind of things, I wouldn't be respectable. I wouldn't be taken seriously, right? We need to come at this in a scientific way and say, look, the Soviet Union showed that you don't have to have capitalism. And that's a great achievement in and of itself. And there you go. All right, folks, I'm exhausted, but it's been a great stream. Thanks for enduring, Job of the Vosh, and I'm going to end. So there we go. I'm going to end this because I'm exhausted, because it's a particularly hot day here in Chicago. But there you go. Hopefully I'll be back soon. Thanks.
Upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.